Chapter 399. In Hu Yan's eyes, Lu Lang would marry a lot of concubines in the future. As the legal wife, she was also his wife. What she could do was to arrange such things. At least, she could not let outsiders say that she was a jealous woman. This was also one of the responsibilities of a legal wife. It was because of this that she asked about Su Munaer. Hu Yan did not know what Yang Qindong was thinking, so she naturally said that she did not know what to do. On the other side, Madame Shui, who was being hugged on the other side, said in a low voice, "Husband, sister, I think Miss Su is very good, especially her singing and dancing skills. I can't compare with her." "Silly girl, there are many people who are good at singing and dancing in this world. Does it mean that they are all good people?" Yang Qindong could not help laughing after hearing Madame Shui's words. "No, I can feel that Miss Su is kind in nature, but I just feel that she has something on her mind. She always gives people a feeling that she is neither close nor distant." Madame Shui was afraid to leave a silly impression in Yang Qindong's eyes, so she explained in a low voice. As soon as these words were said, Yang Qindong's expression became much more serious. Even Madame Shui could feel it. It seemed that Miss Su's mind was not small. It was not good for her health if it went on like this for a long time. Should he do something? Or could it be that some things could be laid out in the open? At this moment, many plans flashed through Yang Qindong's mind. Su Munaer's matter was about to be destroyed along with the Huang bandit army. It was time to solve it. On the official road from Gaozhou to Laizhou, nearly 100,000 people were walking slowly. They had not had a good rest for 2 days and 2 nights. The mental state of the whole team was depressed to a certain extent. Huang Yuliang, who was riding on the horse, looked at all this anxiously. He could not see where the bright future lay. More importantly, the 2,000 trusted subordinates he sent out had already sent back news that they had arrived at Laizhou Prefecture and discovered the presence of the Ming army. However, their numbers did not seem to be large and they might have a chance to attack the city. However, when it came to military operations, they still needed the young master to personally give the order. After all, they originally only wanted to complete the reconnaissance mission. "Young master, the team's condition isn't good. Even if we reach Laizhou, I'm afraid we won't be able to complete the mission." Zhu Fangyong followed beside Huang Yuliang and said with a worried expression. "General Zhu, do you have any ideas?" Huang Yuliang placed his last hope on Zhu Fangyong. "Young master, I have a suggestion. We should pick out some elite soldiers and arrange for them to rest. Then, we should rush to Laizhou city first and attack that place. Only then will the army have a way out." Zhu Fangyong said with a serious expression, as if he was worried about the army and the people. "All right, then I'll have to trouble General Zhu to lead the team. At this time, only General Zhu can do things personally to make this young master feel at ease." Nodding lightly, Huang Yuliang placed his last hope on Zhu Fangyong. The 4 heavenly kings under him had either died in battle, been captured, or disappeared. There were not many people in the army that he could truly trust. Even Zhu Fangyong could not make him completely trust him. However, at this moment, Huang Yuliang did not have any other choice. He could only take a gamble. This. Zhu Fangyong did not immediately agree. Instead, he said with a thoughtful expression, "I do not dare to disobey young master's orders. However, if we want to storm Laizhou Prefecture, I'm afraid we will need young master's 2,000 trusted soldiers. If I may be so bold, I would like to ask young master to write a letter and have those people listen to your orders." Frowning, Huang Yuliang said with some suspicion, "Do we really need these 2,000 trusted soldiers to act personally? Can't General Zhu take a few more people from the army to storm the city?" Huang Yuliang didn't seem willing, and this was within Zhu Fangyong's expectations. Therefore, after hearing Huang Yuliang's words, Zhu Fangyong had an awkward expression on his face. "Young master, as you can see, the army has been rushing through the night, and their condition is no longer the same as before. If we don't attack Laizhou city in one go, I'm afraid that the morale of the army will be shaken. If that happens, I'm afraid that the situation won't be good. Zhu Fangyong's words were very reasonable. The art of war was about winning a battle in one go. Once the battle became a battle of attrition, there would be pursuers behind and obstructions in front. The current Huang bandit army would not be able to handle it. For the sake of the big picture and his own safety, Huang Yuliang lowered his head and thought for a few breaths of time. Then, he nodded and said, "Fine, since this is the case, I will hand the 2,000 men over to General Zhu. I wish you victory." "As you wish." In the following time, Huang Yuliang personally wrote a letter to Zhu Fangyong. This was equivalent to handing over the command of the 2,000 soldiers to Zhu Fangyong. Following which, Zhu Fangyong selected 3,000-strong young men from the 50,000-strong army and rushed towards the Liezhou ahead of everyone else. Young master, General Zhu left. Other than the weapons he carried with him, he did not take any gold or silver. The person in charge of watching Zhu Fangyong came to Huang Yuliang's side and reported in a small voice. Understood. Huang Yuliang's expression clearly relaxed a lot after hearing this news. He was worried that Zhu Fangyong would think of a way to escape when he saw that the situation was not good. However, if he did not take any gold or silver with him, it was unlikely that he would not return. If this was the case, then he could relax a lot. In his heart, he prayed that Zhu Fangyong would successfully take down Liezhou city. This might be his only chance and hope to turn things around. On the second day, the army passed through 5 miles of Gaozhou city. They could already see the tall city walls in the distance. They could also see the sun and moon banners there. However, because the difference in strength between the two sides was too great, General Yu Guang, who was guarding Gaozhou city, did not have the slightest intention of going out to fight. Close to 100,000 people successfully passed through Gaozhou city. Soon after, good news came from the front lines. The letter was personally written by Zhu Fangyong. He said that he brought people to Liezhou city in the night. After reporting to his 2,000 soldiers, he launched an attack on the city at dawn. Because the soldiers sacrificed their lives and there were not many Ming dynasty soldiers guarding Liezhou city, the battle ended in one battle. Liezhou city was now in the hands of the Huang bandit army. Ha, good, good. Seeing this news and seeing that the army had successfully passed through Gaozhou city, the tiredness of the past few days was swept away. Huang Yuliang finally saw a new hope. Pass down the order, the army will speed up. The sooner we reach Liezhou city, the better we can rest there and sleep for a few days. After the order was passed down, everyone's eyes were filled with hope. Their speed was even faster than before. After having a goal and hope, everyone's potential was also stimulated. Originally, it would have taken 3 days to complete the journey. However, on the second night, the army arrived at the Liezhou prefecture city. Looking from afar, the city gates were wide open. A group of Huang bandit army were holding torches on both sides of the city gates, welcoming the young master and the army. Ha, good, good. Although Huang Yuliang was very tired, at this moment, it was as if he had the final radiance of the setting sun. His face revealed an excited and relaxed expression. From afar, Zhu Fangyong and a group of followers appeared. When they were 3 steps away from Huang Yuliang, they half knelt on the ground. Then, they raised their head and said, "Young master, I did not disappoint you and took down Liezhou city. Right now, the city has already prepared hot food and water. We are just waiting for the army to settle in and rest." Good, good. General Zhu, you have worked hard. Huang Yuliang said a few more times. Then, his gaze seemed to casually fall on the welcoming army. He frowned slightly. He did not see the presence of his 2,000 soldiers. Huang Yuliang's suspicious gaze fell on Zhu Fangyong's eyes, and he also felt that something was amiss. However, before he could speak, the army behind suddenly became chaotic. Then, a scout on a fast horse rushed over. Young master, something bad has happened. The Ming army behind us has suddenly increased their speed. They are now less than 10 li away from us. So fast. We need to enter the city quickly. Men, protect young master as he enters the city. Zhu Fangyong's reaction was extremely fast. He knew that the sixth young master had rushed over with his army. It was time to reel in the net. Without any explanation, he waved his arm. Behind him, people rushed past him and rushed in front of Huang Yuliang. Wait. Huang Yuliang already felt that something was wrong. However, he could not pinpoint what was wrong. Instinctively, he wanted to resist. However, he did not expect that the people who ran to his side only needed to touch his body to make him feel numb. Then, he felt dizzy and fell to the ground. Fortunately, he was discovered and Zhu Fangyong's subordinates caught him in time. Using this opportunity, he shouted, "The young master has fainted from exhaustion. Everyone, listen to my orders. Enter the city quickly." There were pursuers behind them. Entering the city was the safest way. There was no need for Zhu Fangyong to say anything. Everyone was already scrambling to rush into the city. At this moment, these people walked as if they were flying. How could they be tired at all? With everyone's concerted efforts, they finally entered the city when the Ming army was 2 li away from the city. The moment the heavy city gates closed, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Immediately, many people fell to the ground and slept because they were too tired and relaxed. Some of the people who were barely holding on also entered the houses allocated to them by the city and fell asleep on their beds. A total of 50,000 Huang bandits and 40,000 commoners fell asleep in the Liezhou prefecture. Just as they fell asleep, outside the city, Yang Qindong led 5,000 people into the city. At the same time, the bandit leader Huang Yuliang was led to a large courtyard in the Liezhou prefecture. Chapter 400. When Huang Yuliang could not see the 2,000 soldiers he sent outside the city, he began to have doubts in his heart. It was only because of the battle report from behind that he put down his thoughts and hurried into the city. However, as soon as he entered the city and entered his large courtyard, which was also when he separated from the army, over 100 vigorous men rushed out from all over the courtyard. The dozens of guards around him were quickly killed, and he was also tied up with ropes. Huang Yuliang, whose mouth was gagged and could not speak, was furious. However, with his body tied up, he could only struggle with all his might to express the dissatisfaction in his heart. All of this continued until he was sent to the magistrate's office and saw a young man sitting high above. Beside the young man was Zhu Fangyong, whom he had once given great authority to. Only then was the white cloth in his mouth taken off, and what followed was a torrent of curses. "Zhu Fangyong, this young master has treated you well. How can you do this to me?" After the white cloth was removed, Huang Yuliang's shouts could be heard. After being tortured for so long, how could he still have the strength to shout? "You have treated me well. You can ask yourself, when have you truly trusted me? Bring him in." Facing Huang Yuliang's questioning, Zhu Fangyong's expression did not change, and he shouted outside. Following this shout, a man with a face full of sideburns was quickly brought in. Just like Huang Yuliang, his entire body was also tied up. Upon seeing this person, Huang Yuliang was dumbfounded. Of course, he recognized the person who was tied up. This was the assistant he had secretly arranged by Zhu Fangyong's side. He was also a spy, and his name was Lu Chang. Normally, everything about Zhu Fangyong was secretly reported to him by this person. When Lu Chang appeared, Zhu Fangyong looked at Huang Yuliang and said, "Since you trust me, why did you arrange for someone to secretly monitor me? Moreover, you even ordered him to kill me on the spot if he discovered that I had any thoughts of rebelling. Can this also be called treating people well?" These words were naturally from Lu Chang. Hearing this, Huang Yuliang knew that there was no way to salvage the situation. He didn't want to dwell on this matter anymore. Instead, he changed his tune and scolded, "Zhu Fangyong, you are a despicable person who betrays his master for glory. Today, you can betray me to curry favor with the southern Ming Empire. Who knows if you will betray your current master to curry favor with someone else one day. You are such a two-faced person. You have no ruler, no father, no heaven, and no earth. You deserve to be punished by everyone. This was Huang Yuliang's counterattack before his death. When he knew that the matter was over and everything was irreversible, he set up another trap before his death. He could already tell that the one in control here was not Zhu Fangyong, but the young man sitting at the head of the table. Even so, his accusation before his death would definitely be like a thorn in the young man's heart. Once there was an opportunity, today's words might become the step that would lead Zhu Fangyong to the guillotine. Zhu Fangyong understood the meaning behind Huang Yuliang's words, and his face turned ugly. Although he was ordered to go undercover this time, in order to gain Huang Yuliang's trust, he had indeed put in some effort and emotions. He had even said some overboard words. However, that was only because the situation forced him to do so. However, if someone were to repeat what he had said back then, he wouldn't be able to defend himself even if he had 100 mouths. When Huang Yuliang's expression changed, he also laughed out loud. He noticed that not only did Zhu Fangtong's expression turn ugly, but the young man sitting at the head of the table also had an unhappy expression. Did this not prove that the thorn he planted had already taken effect? Ha 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 ha. Just as Huang Yuliang's laughter sounded, another loud laugh followed, and it quickly drowned out his laughter. This voice came from Yang Qindong, who was sitting at the head of the table. Yang Qindong's sudden laughter stopped Huang Yuliang's laughter. He looked at the young man with a puzzled expression. He couldn't understand why the other party was laughing, and he couldn't tell what was going to happen next. Ha, very good, very good. As expected of someone who could become a bandit leader. This psychological attack is indeed powerful. It's just that your calculations are wrong. Battalion Commander Zhu was originally arranged by me to be by your side. Everything he did and everything he said was approved by me. Perhaps in the process of carrying out the mission, he had no choice but to use some tricks. However, that was also to better complete the plan. Now that you have been captured and kneeled in front of me, it is clear proof. Yang Qindong, who was laughing loudly, first proved Zhu Fangyong's innocence. He explained that Zhu Fangyong had become a spy completely under his orders, and everything he did was to complete the mission. With this, he placed Zhu Fangyong in an extremely high position. Next, Yang Qindong continued to speak in order to prevent any future troubles. Zhu Fangyong will be the deputy commander of the Cold Vanguard's 2nd Regiment, and will be awarded the rank of lieutenant colonel in recognition of his outstanding contribution in eliminating the Huang bandit army. From now on, no one is allowed to mention that Deputy Commander Zhu was a spy in the Huang bandit army. If anyone dares to disobey this order, they will be punished according to military law. Now, I will have to trouble Deputy Commander Huang to personally kill Huang Yuliang in the lobby and draw a perfect conclusion to this matter. First, he placed Zhu Fangyong in a righteous position so that he could be justified in his actions. Next, he praised and promoted him to show that he had done a good job. Next, he warned the others that this matter was over, and if anyone dared to bring up the old scores, they would be severely punished. Finally, he arranged for Zhu Fangyong to chop off Huang Yuliang's head. This way, he would really be cut in half. Zhu Fangyong heard Yang Qindong's painstaking efforts and knelt on the ground with a thud. Thank you, 6th young master, for your trust. Zhu Fangyong will never be able to repay your trust even if I die 10,000 times. That's enough. From now on, you will be a high-ranking officer in the Cold Vanguard Army. Don't talk about death so casually. Beta Persei, give Deputy Commander Zhu a knife so that he won't continue to be noisy. Yang Qindong looked at Zhu Fangyong with a smile and handed over a steel knife. Holding the steel knife, Zhu Fangyong walked to Huang Yuliang, who was kneeling on the ground, with a ferocious expression. Feeling the aura of death, Huang Yuliang no longer spoke as confidently as before. Instead, he peed and pooped all over the ground. General Zhu, on account of the fact that I have treated you well in the past, please plead for mercy for me. As long as you don't kill me, I will do whatever you want me to do in the future. Hey, despicable person, die. After Zhu Fangyong's loud shout, a silver light flashed and a large head was separated from his body. Fresh blood spurted out from the neck and covered Zhu Fangyong's face and body. Huang Yuliang was dead. His death represented the official end of the so-called Guangdong uprising that had caused chaos in Guangdong for nearly 2 years. It also meant that the Huang father and son had completely retired from the stage of history. Now that Huang Yuliang was dead, the next step was to deal with the entire Huang bandit army. Under the prearranged arrangements, the first thing to do was to bring out the 40,000 people from Wu State Prefecture and leave the city. They didn't even know where they were going. When they woke up from their dreams, they were led out of their homes and brought to the nearby docks. There, a large ship was already waiting for them. The ship naturally belonged to the Yangtze Navy that had been ordered by the 6th Young Master to carry out a mission. The leader was the Navy Division Commander and commander of the 1st Regiment. At the same time, he was also the person in charge of the Navy. He was also one of the first people to follow Yang Qindong, Gao Xiong. It had been more than 2 years since they last saw each other. Now, they could finally see the glory of the 6th Young Master. Gao Xiong stood his ground and used his authority to take the initiative to come to Laizhou Prefecture to pick up people. Laizhou Prefecture Yamen. When Gao Xiong appeared in front of Yang Qindong, he first gave a standard military salute. Then his knees went soft and he knelt on the ground. Gao Xiong wants to meet the young master. Greetings, young master. Ha, you're already a division commander and in charge of the entire navy. I heard that in this part of the sea, your name Gao Xiong is known by everyone. Even mentioning your name can stop a 3-year-old child from crying. Why are you crying now? The moment he saw Gao Xiong, Yang Qindong's heart was filled with excitement. This little pirate who wanted to find trouble with him but was subdued by him had finally become a general. It really made people sigh and feel gratified. Listening to Yang Qindong talk about his glorious deeds, Gao Xiong couldn't help but cry and smile. He said embarrassedly, "Young master, what I heard were rumors. I don't have that kind of ability. All of this was given to me by the young master. I was just following the orders of the young master." Oh. Don't be arrogant. That's good. Come, get up. Tell me about the situation on Ryukyu Island and what Reiken City is like. Yang Qindong nodded with praise. Gao Xiong was originally a pirate, so he was very familiar with the sea. He was also proficient in naval warfare. He was indeed a talent. However, as the Yangtze Navy continued to expand, there were many people who came to join him every day. Although there weren't many people like him, if he wanted to find them, he could always find some. But no matter how powerful those people were, it was difficult for them to be as loyal as Gao Xiong. It was this kind of loyalty that was hard to come by. The feeling of being supported and raised from a young age was not something that others could compare with. Gao Xiong, who was personally helped up by Yang Qindong, was very excited. Young master, speaking of Little Ryukyu Island, the changes are not small. The fertile land has been mined, and factories have been built in the areas that can't be farmed. The city on the island has been reinforced with cement, and it's very different from before. But none of this can compare to the changes in Reiken City. That is a city that was built by the young master himself. Its old appearance has been replaced with a new one. The roads are straight, the streets are clean, and the city looks brand new. By the way, the rubber trees have been put into use. Factory manager Wan has already made the first batch of electric circuits according to your instructions. He has installed them in the Reiken Palace. When night falls, the place will be as bright as day. Every time this happens, the people of Reiken City will kneel on the ground and shout that it is a miracle. The second batch of boats carrying the rubber trees has already set off. According to factory manager Wan, it won't be long before electricity enters the homes of the people. When that time comes, Reiken City will become a city that never sleeps. Chapter 401. Gao Xiong spoke excitedly, and Yang Qindong listened attentively. From time to time, he would give some suggestions. Tell manager Wan that the rubber trees can also be cultivated. If the climate is suitable, they will survive very well. Transporting them so far by sea is not a long-term plan. While the master and servant were chatting, the Lizhou citizens were also forcefully sent onto the ships. When they were being moved from their ancestral land, many of them had expressions of reluctance. There were even some who resisted. However, Yang Qindong believed that once they reached Ryukyu Island, they would know what a true paradise was. At that time, even if they were chased away, no one would want to leave. Moreover, before long, being able to reach Ryukyu Island would become a symbol of glory. At that time, it would be difficult for anyone to snatch such an opportunity. 40,000 civilians of Wushou Prefecture, 50,000 civilians of Lizhou Prefecture, and 50,000 Huang bandits under strict supervision boarded the ships. They would become another batch of residents of Little Ryukyu Island, making their own contributions to the development of the island. 90,000 citizens were easier to deal with, but 50,000 Huang bandits was a headache. Although there were many young people among them, there were also some who were brave and ruthless. For this reason, Yang Qindong specially arranged for Zhu Fangyong to follow them to the island. After all, he had led them before and was familiar with their situation. However, before they boarded the ship, Yang Qindong still instructed Zhu Fangyong, if they have a kind nature or can be changed, we can spend some effort to help them. However, if they have an impure heart, we can sentence them based on their past actions. If they have committed heinous crimes, we can kill some of them. If they haven't committed heinous crimes, we can arrange for them to serve their sentences. Isn't there always a shortage of people to build roads? We can arrange for them. Fortunately, during the last battle of Wuzhou, Zhu Fangyong had already arranged for some uncivilized people to fight against the Ming army. Both sides had suffered great losses, and most of the troublemakers had been dealt with. The following work shouldn't be too difficult. Work went on in an orderly manner. In order to complete the mission, Gao Xiong had brought along 2 battalions of the Navy's Cold Front, as well as 3 auxiliary battalions. With them and the fact that most of the people being transported were civilians, there was no need to worry about their safety. It's time to solve her problem. With a sigh, Yang Qindong led Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and the others to the backyard of the Lizhou government office. Su Maner had just entered the city with Hu Yan and Madame Shui. She was still settling down and tidying up. Little Yun, bring a basin of clean water over. The windowsill is really too dirty. Hearing the sound of footsteps behind her, Su Maner said without turning her head. However, since she had already said that, she quickly stood there and did not move. After about 2 or 3 breaths of time, she slowly turned around with a nervous expression. You've come. Naturally, the person who came was Yang Qindong. Gao Xiong and the others were about to leave, and it was very likely that they would be busy with the matters in Yunnan. Naturally, it would not be good for Su Maner to stay in the military camp. Besides, he already had a rough idea of the other party's intentions. There were some things that should be resolved, and it would not be good to drag things on. Yang Qindong saw the graceful Su Maner turn her head. She was still as stunning as ever. He couldn't help but take a few more glances and make a soft sound of agreement. Su Maner was naturally not prepared for Yang Qindong's arrival. Previously, she had heard that he had gone to busy himself with military matters. Now, he had suddenly appeared in her boudoir. How could she not be shocked? She was even a bit nervous. Her gaze seemed to involuntarily glance outside. When she saw that it was still afternoon and not dark time for bedtime, she couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. She thought to herself, no matter how anxious she is, she can't possibly do anything to me right now. As a gentleman, he had to have his own demeanor. As she had not expected this, Su Maner was first nervous. However, her experience quickly took effect. Her expression started to return to normal. Her hands and feet were also very nimble as she prepared a cup of tea and brought it to Yang Qindong. Lord Imperial Envoy, please have some tea. How many times have I told you? You can call me the young master of the Yang family, or you can call me the East Marshal. Lord Imperial Envoy is an official title. It is not something a beautiful woman like you should call me. Yang Qindong's voice was still ringing in her ears. However, his hand had already pressed down on the teacup. Then, his other hand seized the opportunity to grab Su Maner's jade arm and did not let go. Ah! Who would have thought that Yang Qindong had lost his usual demeanor and was actually committing lewd acts in broad daylight? Su Maner, who was completely unprepared, couldn't help but cry out in shock. Qing! East Marshal, what are you doing? What do you think I'm doing? Didn't you come to my side to serve me? Yang Qindong asked with interest. Yes, yes. But why didn't East Marshal have any thoughts about me before? As she struggled, Su Maner also asked the question in her heart. Before? Previously, we dealt with the Huang bandit army together. How could I have such thoughts? Now that the overall situation has been decided, I naturally have to do what needs to be done. Come, beauty. At this moment, Yang Qindong had changed his usual gentle demeanor. It was as if he was a completely different person. He became impatient. Yang Qindong's change was too great. If Hu Yan and Lady Shui were here, they would definitely find it very strange. In the end, Su Maner still didn't know much about him. She thought that this was his true appearance and that she had seen through his nature. At the same time, there was a faint excitement in her heart. She had been arranged to be by Yang Qindong's side. Her purpose was to kill Yang Qindong at the last moment. At the same time, she wanted to end the Southern Ming dynasty's future troubles. At the same time, she also wanted to fulfill her wish of repaying the debt of gratitude. With this thought, she had already imagined the scene of her killing Yang Qindong countless times in her mind. She had even imagined what she should do now when the other party was careless. On the surface, Su Maner appeared very nervous. However, she was very excited in her heart. She also changed her usual dignified appearance. First, she revealed a fox-like smile. Then, she said, Dong Shui, don't be anxious. I'm destined to be yours. However, even if it's my first time, I have to leave a good impression. Why don't you give me some time to take a bath? This was already a form of tacit agreement. If it was any other man who heard these words, they would be overjoyed. Towards such a request, there should be nothing wrong with it. However, in front of Yang Qindong, he didn't act according to common sense. Instead, he shook his head anxiously. There's no need to take a bath. You already smell very good. I can even smell the scent coming from your body. Why don't we go directly to the bed? As he spoke, Yang Qindong actually used a little strength and hugged Su Maner by the waist. Then, he laughed loudly and walked towards the wooden bed not far away. You are really impatient. A hint of anger flashed across Su Maner's eyes. Then, she regained her composure. Not only that, she even cooperated and stretched her arm backwards. Then, she touched Yang Qindong's waist. She looked as if she was trying to cater to him. Pooh! Just as Yang Qindong was laughing loudly and feeling pleased with himself, the sharp hairpin suddenly pierced into his waist. On the hairpin was Su Maner's tightly clenched arm. At this moment, she no longer had the expression of cater to him. Instead, she was glaring angrily. Then, a look of relief appeared on her face. Plop! After being pierced by the hairpin, Yang Qindong seemed to be seriously injured. His hands suddenly became weak. Then, he threw Su Maner from his arms to the ground. Then, he took a few steps back. You want to kill me? Why? With a face full of doubt, Yang Qindong widened his eyes. It was as if he couldn't believe what was happening in front of his eyes. There's no why. It's just because you have to die. Su Maner, who had climbed up from the ground, gritted her teeth and said. Then, she laughed loudly as if she had lost her mind. I didn't expect that I would really be able to complete this mission. Ha ha ha. Mission? Who gave you this mission? Could it be Zhu Qizhen from Yingzong? Yang Qindong asked with a forceful tone. When Yang Qindong asked this question, a look of surprise flashed across Su Maner's eyes. However, when she saw the hairpin in her hand, she couldn't help but shake her head and laugh. Forget it. There's poison on my hairpin. It has already entered your body. There's no saving you. Since you're going to die, why do you still need to ask so clearly? It's precisely because I'm going to die that I want to be an understanding ghost. I don't know if you can fulfill my wish. As Yang Qindong staggered, he kicked over a wooden stool as he retreated. Finally, he steadied himself. Seeing Yang Qindong in such a state, for some reason, a look of pity flashed across Su Maner's eyes. Then, she slowly turned her head away. Her originally beautiful and clear eyes couldn't stop the tears from flowing down. You're crying. You still can't bear to kill me, right? You must have your reasons, right? Yang Qindong, who had noticed this scene, continued to ask questions. Don't ask any more. You're going to die, and I'm going to die too. Why do you still need to be so clear? What's the point? With tears in her eyes, Su Maner, whose voice was choked with sobs, kept shaking her head. Obviously, this was a scene that she really didn't want to face. Of course there's a point. If you have no choice but to kill me, even if I die here, I can give the order not to let others make things difficult for you. In this way, although I'm going to die, you can live. Yang Hodong's tone was weak, but he still had to get to the bottom of this. No. Su Maner, who was crying, shook her head. I have to die. From the moment I got close to you, I was already a dead person. Even if you spare me, others won't let me off either. Why? Yang Qindong was close to roaring. It was as if he had used all the strength in his body to shout this question. Chapter 402. Perhaps it was because this shout was too soul-stirring, or perhaps it was because Su Maner had too many things in her heart and wanted to find someone to confide in before she died. She said with tears in her eyes, do you know? Just before today, I thought that I could live for a while longer because it was too difficult to kill you. You weren't like other men who were greedy for my beauty. I couldn't even get close to you, so how could I kill you? So I thought that I could continue living. I even thought that there would be a day when I would have feelings for you and give up the idea of killing you. But today, you finally revealed your true colors. So, you must die. So, you don't deserve to know the reason. Towards the end, Su Maner also used a roaring voice to reply. So, you still have a good impression of me. So, you already have feelings for me, right? Is there any use in saying all this now? You and I are both people who are about to die. She shook her head instinctively. But suddenly, Su Maner's expression changed. She was shocked to discover that the current Yang Qindong was no longer as weak as before. On the contrary, his tone was calm. It was as if he had returned to his original expression of strategizing. At this moment, Yang Qindong was also staring at Su Maner. When he saw how shocked she was, he asked, what you meant just now was that you have feelings for me and if I don't die, your mission won't be completed. So, you don't have to die, right? Yes. Instinctively, Su Maner nodded. Good. Then, young master won't die. So, you don't have to die either, right? Yang Qindong also nodded. Then, he picked up the wooden stool that he had kicked down and casually sat on it. At this moment, he didn't look like he was seriously injured at all and was about to die. All of this fell into Su Maner's eyes, causing her to wonder if she was hallucinating. She first rubbed her eyes hard, then said, that's impossible. My hairpin has a huge poison on it. Once it pierces into a person's body, they will be poisoned to death. But what if it doesn't pierce into your body? Yang Qindong answered this question as he took off the bulletproof vest he was wearing. Since he wanted to have a showdown with Su Maner and knew that she might try to kill him, how could he not be prepared? If I don't die, does that mean that you don't have to die? The moment Yang Qindong stood up, Su Maner had already been petrified on the spot. First, she revealed an expression of disbelief, then her eyes were empty. It was as if all the energy in her body had been sucked out at this moment. With a plop, she sat down on the wooden chair behind her. At this moment, even Su Maner herself did not know what she was thinking. Was it the feeling of her plan failed? Or was it disappointment with a hint of joy? She couldn't explain all of this clearly. All she knew was that the moment she stabbed out with the hairpin, her heart had indeed ached fiercely. Even the words she said at the end were said in an emotional state. She was afraid that she had already forgotten how many of them were from her heart, and she was even more unable to face them. Now, Yang Qindong was actually fine. That meant that she hadn't completed her mission. Then, she should be sad right now. But why was there a hint of joy in her heart that she couldn't explain? Su Maner sat back down on the stool. It was Yang Qindong's turn to speak with assurance. You don't have to ask why I'm prepared. I still have many tricks up my sleeve. Otherwise, I wouldn't have lived until today. I actually know some things about you long ago, so I can understand you. You must have your own difficulties. Now, I'll give you a chance. Tell me everything. No matter what the reason is, I can promise that I won't kill you. Yang Qindong's words rang out in the lady's boudoir, but he didn't get any response from Su Maner. She just sat there in a daze, with a dull look in her eyes. What's wrong? Why aren't you saying anything? Didn't you say that you have a mission? What kind of mission is this? As Yang Qindong spoke, he moved closer to Su Maner. He could feel the struggle in her heart and could also imagine the entanglement in her heart. He was a little worried that she might suddenly commit suicide. He slowly moved closer and was prepared to make a move at any time. Yang Qindong's footsteps got closer and closer. The distance of 5 to 6 steps took him 3 breaths' time. Just as he was about to rush over and grab Su Maner, the lady's sleeves suddenly trembled and a copper hairpin appeared. However, this time, the hairpin that appeared did not have any intention of targeting Yang Qindong. Instead, it changed its direction and placed it on her neck. Su Maner's originally expressionless face also had a hint of blood. Don't come over. I've let you down. I'll commit suicide in front of you. I just hope that you won't make things difficult for my maid, Xiao Yun. Just pretend that I've never appeared here. Wait. The moment Su Maner finished speaking, the hairpin had already moved towards her snow-white neck. However, at the same time, Yang Qindong's shout rang out. If you don't say anything and just die like this, in order to find out the reason behind this, it's inevitable that I'll do something to your maid. So, you can't die yet? At least, you can't die before you tell me the reason. Yang Qindong's unconventional method of wanting to save Su Maner was a little cold-blooded, but it was still a method. However, in front of Su Maner, who was determined to die, its effect was very limited. Not only did she look as if she did not listen to him, she even said with a sorrowful expression, "Why? Don't I even have the right to choose to die?" After saying that, a look of resentment flashed across Su Maner's eyes, as if she was complaining about how unfair the heavens were to her. Since they had allowed her to be born, why did they have to torment her like this? The light that flashed across Su Maner's eyes gave Yang Qindong a bad feeling. He could seriously say that this woman really wanted to die. If that was the case, it would be difficult to move her no matter how much he said now. Then, what should he do? Just as Su Maner was determined to die and Yang Qindong was at a loss of what to do, the maid, Xiao Yun's shout suddenly came from outside the room. "Miss, are you inside?" "Ugh." Xiao Yun, who had shouted halfway, immediately stopped moving. It was obvious that Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, who were supposed to be outside, had stopped her. The moment the two of them made a move outside, Yang Qindong, who was inside the room, also moved. With a big stride, he crossed the distance that he would usually need to take 3 steps, and appeared beside Su Maner like a gust of wind. It was Xiao Yun's shout just now that caused Su Maner's face to become slightly absent-minded. This sudden opportunity was seized by young Qingdong. He flew over and came to Su Maner's side, reaching out his hand to snatch the hairpin. Yang Qingdong's speed was already very fast, and he had grasped the opportunity very accurately. However, it was as if there was God's will in the unseen world. Just as he reached out his hand to grab it, Su Maner reacted. Her arm suddenly fell, piercing straight towards her neck. Then, as her arm fell, a large hand pushed up and grabbed the delicate hand that was holding the hairpin. Even so, her movements were still slower by half a beat. The hairpin still left a small scratch on Su Maner's fair and flawless neck. Once the scratch was made, fresh blood flowed out of her body. The moment she felt that her neck was a little cold, Su Maner stopped struggling and allowed Yang Qingdong to restrain her arm. She also allowed herself to be held in his arms. It's useless. This hairpin is also coated with a strong poison. If it comes into contact with my body, I'll definitely die. Ha, I'm going to die. With an unknown emotion, Su Maner slowly said this. Then, she raised her gaze slightly and looked at Yang Qingdong's face and eyes. I'm going to die. In the future, I won't be a threat to you. I won't be in so much pain. To me, this is already a kind of release. Release my ass. Yang Qingdong, who had always given off an elegant feeling, suddenly spat out vulgarities at this moment. Then, he roared loudly like a male lion, since you've come to my side, you're my woman. Without my consent, no one can decide whether you live or die. This includes you. But I'm still going to die, aren't I? Seeing that Yang Qingdong was angry, a smile actually bloomed on Su Maner's face. It seemed to be a satisfied smile, but more like a happy smile. I thought that you didn't care about me at all. I thought that I couldn't enter your eyes. But now, lying in your arms, I can clearly feel your heartbeat and breathing. I can also feel that you like me, right? As a person who was about to die, Su Maner seemed to be able to finally free her heart. Her words were much more direct than before. Yes, I like you. From the first time I saw you, I was mesmerized by you. Yang Qingdong kept nodding and admitting his feelings. And you also like me, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have cried just now, right? Faced with Yang Qingdong's question, Su Maner really wanted to say yes. Through these days of observation and contact, she saw all the good points of this man. He was elegant, polite, and talented. Especially his strategic attitude on the battlefield and his confidence in life with a smile. It was as if as long as he smiled, there was nothing in the world that could be difficult for him. Which young girl wouldn't like a man with such an imposing aura? Chapter 403. Other people could like Yang Qingdong, but Su Maner could not. Her background meant that her right to like had long been taken away from her. All she had to do was hide the trace of murderous intent in her heart. She had been doing her best to hide her true feelings. Even until her death, Su Maner still did not dare to admit it. Faced with Yang Qingdong's question, she could only force a smile. I'm about to die. Is this still important? Your embrace is very comfortable. I want to sleep. I'm already very happy to be able to slowly sleep here. After saying this, Su Maner slowly closed her eyes. At the same time, a drop of sparkling tear slid out from the corner of her eye. Perhaps this teardrop represented her last breath. Perhaps when it fell to the ground, she would stop breathing. No. You can't sleep. Someone come quickly. Yang Qingdong knew that if Su Maner closed her eyes and fell asleep now, she would probably never wake up again. Hence, he wanted to stop her from closing her eyes and go to sleep. His shout rang out. Tiger's mane, Beta Persei, and the servant girl, Xiao Yun, who was carried under the blanket like a little chick, rushed into the room. When the three of them saw Yang Qingdong with a dark face and carrying the crying Su Maner in his arms, they stood rooted to the ground as if they had been struck by lightning. They did not know what had happened and why they had seen such a scene. Tiger's mane and beta persei, in particular, were actually a little anxious at this moment. This was because this was the first time they had seen such a terrifying expression on the young master's face. It was as if he was going to eat a living person. Quick, go find a doctor. Find a doctor who can treat poison. Miss Su is injured. She was hurt by the poisonous hairpin. Go quickly. Yang Qindong, who was almost shouting these words, stretched out his right index finger and pointed outside the door. Oh, Tiger's mane and beta persei both agreed readily and turned to leave. At this moment, a weak voice sounded in their ears. Miss should be fine. Not only did Hu Mang and Yang Er, who were about to leave, stop in their tracks, but even Yang Qindong, who looked like he wanted to eat someone, and Su Maner, who was in his arms, widened their eyes at this moment. They looked at the maid, Xiao Yun, who was about to be ignored. Noticing that everyone's gaze was on her, Xiao Yun felt a wave of panic in her heart. She actually lowered her head in fear under such gazes. Raise your head and repeat what you just said, Yang Qindong's voice suddenly rang out, rushing towards Xiao Yun's ears like thunder. Under such a shout, even beta persei, who had always had a thunderous voice, felt a sense of inferiority. However, no one cared about the volume of the voice at this time. Instead, they all looked at Xiao Yun, waiting for her answer. Xiao Yun was also frightened by the thunderous voice. She had no choice but to raise her head again. Using her still weak voice, she asked, May I ask if the hairpin that injured the young miss is the one in your hands? That's right, what's wrong? Yang Qindong instinctively responded, then asked in a deep voice. At this time, he didn't notice that his usual confidence had long disappeared. Now, he was just an ordinary man who was swayed by his feelings. Ah! It really is. Then there's no problem. This hairpin is not poisonous. Only that hairpin is poisonous. When she heard Yang Qindong's clear answer, Xiao Yun couldn't help but speak with joy. Not poisonous. How do you know? Yang Qindong still didn't believe her. Su Maner, who was in his arms, had a slight change in her expression, but no one paid attention to her at this time. It's like this, Xiao Yun was honest. She answered whatever Yang Qindong asked and was extremely cooperative. The hairpin that fell on the ground was given to us by someone else. It was already contaminated with a huge poison. The hairpin in your hands is slightly small, but Miss asked me to prepare it. She said that if things didn't work out, she would use this hairpin to commit suicide. But how could I let Miss die? So I agreed, but in reality, I didn't put anything on it. I lied to Miss, I'm sorry. Xiao Yun told the truth intermittently. Then, she lowered her head and grabbed the corner of her clothes timidly. She looked like she had accepted her punishment. Ha! Ha ha ha, good. Good. You lied well, you lied well. After Yang Qindong understood everything, he actually laughed out loud. Then, he lowered his head to look at Su Maner in his arms and said with a smile, You heard it. It's just a small external wound. This kind of wound won't kill anyone. Su Maner, who was in his arms, was blushing at this moment. The moment Xiao Yun said that she wouldn't die, she already had a faint feeling. Now that the truth was out, she didn't know if she should be resentful or glad. Thinking of how she was still hiding in Yang Qindong's arms, looking so delicate and weak, how could she not be ashamed to see others? Su Maner closed her eyes tightly, but her long eyelashes kept blinking. This meant that she was fine now, better than ever. Knowing that Su Maner was fine, Yang Qindong could finally relax and begin to resolve the matter that had happened. Xiao Yun, you said that the hairpin with the poison was given to you by someone. Who is he? Xiao Yun, don't say it. Su Mo, who was in his arms, suddenly interrupted. Then, she was about to stand up with her beautiful eyes. Since she didn't kill Yang Qindong, as long as she took all the blame, it wouldn't have anything to do with anyone else. Su Maner's interruption made Yang Qindong a little angry. After turning his head to glare at her, he saw her stubborn gaze. To be able to become the top courtesan of the Qinhuai River, it wasn't just because of her beautiful appearance. Regardless of whether it was her intelligence or her methods, she was the best of the best. At this moment, even when facing Yang Qindong, she still showed a fearless expression. If one looked carefully, it was as if she was asking for death. Su Maner's fearless expression infuriated Yang Qindong. In a fit of anger, he suddenly bent down and used his mouth to block her lips. Oh! The sudden change made Su Maner, who was originally indifferent to life and death, completely petrified at this moment. She had thought of many outcomes. For example, she would be tortured severely, or she would be sugar-coated with sweet words. She had even thought of Yang Qindong throwing her back to intimidate the noble who secretly ordered her. Or she would be imprisoned forever and spend the rest of her life in darkness and so on. However, she had thought of many outcomes and methods, but she had never thought that Yang Qindong would suddenly kiss her. Moreover, it was in front of the maid, Xiao Yun, Tiger's Mane, and Beta Persei. The etiquette in ancient times was very strict. Even young men and women who liked each other had to scrupulously abide by their duties in public. Once an action like holding hands was seen by others, they would be scolded as a disgrace to culture. Not to mention such an intimate action like kissing. If it wasn't for the fact that she could clearly feel the peculiar feeling, warmth, and even a hint of sweetness from Yang Qindong's lips, Su Maner wouldn't have dared to let such a thing happen before her eyes even if she was beaten to death. Su Maner completely lost her composure from this kiss. Xiao Yun, Tiger's Mane, and Beta Persei, who were watching this scene, also revealed shocked expressions. Then, Tiger's Mane, who was the first to react, turned his head around. The moment Beta Persei turned around, he did not forget to carry Xiao Yun, who was also staring at this scene, over. As a result, there was another round of struggle. Oh! She did not know how long this kiss lasted. Perhaps it was only a breath, or perhaps it was 3 or 4 breaths, or 7 or 8 breaths. It was only when Su Maner felt that she was suffocating that she struggled violently. She pushed Yang Qindong's chest with both hands, wanting to separate the two of them. At this moment, Yang Qindong had completely developed the idea of conquering the other party. Since he had already started and realized that the effect was quite good, at least he was enjoying it. How could he allow the other party to push him away so easily at this moment? The moment Su Maner exerted force, he also increased his strength. He stretched out his arms and hugged her even more tightly. This kiss also deepened. Originally, it was just a kiss between the lips, not a deep one. But this time, Yang Qindong even stuck out his tongue. After a series of flipping, Su Maner, who had no experience in this, was completely subdued. From the initial intense resistance, it turned into limited resistance. After that, there was no resistance, and then there was some cooperation. All of this could be said to be based on instinct. This time, it took even longer. Tiger's Mane and the other two had already left at some point in time. The sky outside seemed to have darkened. A wave of pain came from her body. The two of them had completely become one. Yang Qindong had been at Miss Su's place for an entire afternoon. He did not even appear during dinner. In the backyard, after tidying up, Hu Yan and Madame Shui guessed what had happened while waiting. The two of them looked at each other, and it was hard to tell what had happened. Yang Qindong's excellence could be seen by almost everyone, and he was so young. It was a blessing to marry such a man. It was the beginning of happiness, the source of joy. However, at the same time, there were pros and cons. Marrying such a man was destined to not share alone. Hu Yan and Madame Shui were already prepared for this. When Su Maner first appeared, they already had this feeling. They just did not expect things to drag on for so long. All right, sister, let's eat first. Your husband won't be able to come. Hu Yan smiled sweetly. She had already returned to normal. She waved her hand, and the delicacies were immediately placed on the table. Chapter 404. In Su Maner's boudoir, the food was also served. The only difference was that the woman in the room no longer had the strength to eat. At this moment, she was lying in Yang Qindong's arms and being fed mouthful by mouthful. Under Yang Qindong's countless corrections and even punishments, Su Maner finally changed her way of addressing him as husband. At this moment, she was using the new way of addressing him. Husband, I still have some strength. Don't I need you to feed me? You still have strength? All right then, let's eat in a while and then go through the actions just now. Yang Qindong nodded as if he was serious and put down the bowl and chopsticks in his hands. No. I don't have any strength left. Su Maner naturally knew what Yang Qindong was preparing to do. She was really frightened and kept shaking her head. From the afternoon until now, more than 6 hours had passed. This man was like an ox that did not know fatigue. He did not allow her to rest for even a moment. She finally understood why Sister Hu Yan and Sister Xuan Yangzi usually served him together. This man really seemed to have endless strength and energy. No one would ever know what his background was. Seeing that Su Maner was begging for mercy, Yang Qindong then said with an uncomplaining expression, "Since you don't have any strength, then let your husband feed you." But you will spoil Maner like this," Su Maner said shyly, but her face was brimming with a happy smile. "I want to spoil you. You have indeed suffered too much in the years that I didn't know you. From now on, you will live the rest of your life without worrying about food and clothing. The happiness that you didn't have in the past will be given to you in double. You only need to accept it and don't reject it anymore, okay?" Yang Qindong looked into Su Maner's eyes seriously and said affectionately. There were tears in Su Maner's eyes again. She thought about her previous life. When she was young, she took refuge and had no one to rely on. When she grew up, she had to learn some skills in order to survive. In order to do better, she studied day and night. Later on, when she had a certain reputation, she had to deal with all kinds of men. Sometimes, when she met difficult customers, she would be mentally and physically exhausted. Many sleepless nights because of this, she did not even know what her future life would be like. Would she be like the other older sisters and find a rich man to marry? And then be trapped in a courtyard for the rest of his life? At that time, he was like a small boat floating on the sea, not knowing where his next destination was. Where is the hope of life? What would happen in the future? However, things were different now. She had a husband who loved her dearly. Most importantly, this man was very outstanding. He seemed to be more outstanding than all the men she had met before. Now that he was treating her so well, she really felt like she couldn't find her bearings. "Husband, can you really always treat me well like this?" Su Maner couldn't believe everything in front of her eyes. She was a little worried about her gains and losses. "Of course, I will always treat Maner well. You can rest assured." Yang Qindong chuckled. At this moment, in his eyes, the Su Maner who was bold, wise, and even tolerant had long disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a petite and lovable woman. But no matter which one it was, he liked her very much. Under Yang Qindong's service, Su Maner ate some food. When the sky was completely dark, the two of them lay on the bed again. However, this time, the two of them didn't do anything. This was naturally the result of being considerate. Because of this, Su Maner, who felt that Yang Qindong's body had begun to change, said embarrassedly, "Husband, why don't you go look for Sister Hu Yan and Sister Xuan Yangzi? Don't let yourself suffer because of me." "How can it be suffering? I'm willing to be with you. Moreover, this is the first night that the two of us have truly spent together. Of course, I have to accompany you." Maner, don't be embarrassed. Why don't we talk?" Yang Qindong hugged Su Maner in his arms and said softly. Su Maner nodded lightly and moved her head closer to Yang Qindong's arms. She twisted her body slightly and felt that she was in a comfortable position. Then, she opened her mouth and said, "Husband, you said that you know everything about Maner. Is that true?" "You can say that. Yang Qindong nodded. I know that you were originally born in a big family. You have a very powerful grandfather called Su Qing. He was once the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights in the capital of Nanjing. After Yang Qindong told her everything that he knew, it was Su Maner's turn to talk. Perhaps she was unable to mention these things to others. Now that she could finally open her heart and continue talking, she might as well tell him everything. In the end, without waiting for Yang Qindong to ask, she told him the reason for staying here and the mission clearly. Su Maner's grandfather was Su Qing. When Su Qing was sentenced to death, the Su family became a thing of the past. As the only living bloodline member of the Su family, Su Maner had a wish since she was young, and that was to redress the Su family's reputation. For this goal, she was even willing to give up everything, including her body and her only life. Becoming the #1 courtesan was a method that Su Maner wanted to use to achieve her goal. She wanted to use her beauty to build a network of connections and then use those men who had taken a fancy to her to help her achieve her goal. However, as she came into contact with more and more people, her mind became more and more mature. She realized how naive her thoughts were. Those men might want to curry favor with her and even say some unrealistic sweet nothings in order to become her son-in-law. However, all of these were just words for the sake of words. When she really asked them to do it, all of them retreated. Most of the time, before Su Maner could say anything, she would just say that there was a high-ranking official in the imperial court who was spying on her. This person was also very favored by the emperor and was one of the most important officials. She didn't want to become a canary raised by this person and wanted freedom. At that time, those so-called wealthy guests would all reveal their timid faces. Su Maner was indeed very beautiful and extremely beautiful. She also had a unique and attractive temperament that made countless men unable to stop looking at her. However, this did not mean that they could really sacrifice everything, including their lives, for this woman. Putting aside whether they had the guts or not, such an important official was not someone that those young master and young master, who only relied on their family to have a respectable status, could act brazenly. These people all retreated. They either did not want to get close to her in the future or said that they wanted to help but were unable to do so. In short, under all kinds of excuses, Su Maner was disappointed again and again. Until one day, she finally saw through it. If she wanted to take revenge, it was completely useless to just look for those grand guests who liked her. Because of this, she started to feel discouraged. She even had the thought of leaving this place and finding a place where there was no one to live out her life alone. Suddenly, a group of mysterious people appeared and brought her to a completely unfamiliar place. Su Maner, who thought that she had been kidnapped, once thought of committing suicide to keep her chastity. The other party's leader suddenly said, "Do you want to die? Don't you want to take revenge for Su Qing?" With just one sentence, Su Maner's will to die disappeared. Then, there was a deal to complete the mission and redress the Su family's name. Who is this person? Is it Ingzong? When Yang Qindong heard this, a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Anyone who wanted to take his life would have to be prepared to be killed by him instead. No. Out of Yang Qindong's expectations, Su Maner shook her head and denied his idea. With their current relationship, Su Maner naturally would not lie to Yang Qindong. Therefore, when she said no, the sixth young master, who believed that he could see through everything, was a little surprised. Then who could it be? Could it be that it has nothing to do with Ingzong? Yang Qindong still said with some disbelief. It was not that he did not believe Su Maner, but because he believed in his own judgment. There is some connection. At least Ingzong sent someone here before. I can see that he has taken a fancy to me and wants to take me in. But ever since that person came to talk to me, the emperor did not send anyone here. I don't know if this counts as a connection. Su Maner was very smart. From this action, she managed to deduce a clue related to Ingzong Zhuqizhen. And, in that case, there is indeed some connection. At least it proves that he should know about this matter. That's right, you haven't found him yet. Who is that person? I don't think his position is too low. Otherwise, you wouldn't believe that he can redress your Su family's name. Yang Qindong nodded. He agreed with Su Maner's deduction, but he was very curious about the identity of the person who took the initiative to speak up. Without making Yang Qindong wait for long, Su Maner opened her cherry lips and said, "He is Menda." Menda, commander of the embroidered uniform guards. After Yang Qindong heard the name, he immediately said this person's official position. That's right. Su Maner was not surprised at all. Yang Qindong could be so highly regarded. If he even knew about Menda, she would feel that it was strange. Menda, commander of the Southern Ming embroidered uniform guards. It was just a third-rank official position. And when this embroidered uniform guards was mentioned, everyone's first reaction would probably be that they were arrogant and domineering. In reality, the embroidered uniform guards did indeed have a lot of power. The embroidered uniform guards wore tuxedos and had embroidered spring swords at their waists. A sentence like, "Embroidered uniform guards are handling a case, pedestrians should give way," would probably scare many people. But how powerful was this arrogant commander of the embroidered uniform guards? First of all, in terms of official position, the commander of the embroidered uniform guards was only a third-rank official. His official position was not that high. However, the power of the commander of the embroidered uniform guards was through the roof. It was said that Zhu Yuanzhang was a pure peasant. Because his background was too lowly, he was always afraid that others would not accept him and want to rebel against him. Hence, he established the embroidered uniform guards. The embroidered uniform guards also became an extremely sharp sword in the hands of the emperor. The embroidered uniform guards directly received orders from the emperor. Other than the emperor, they could disobey anyone else's orders. Chapter 405. The authority of the embroidered uniform guard could be said to be a combination of the Ministry of Justice, the Supreme Court, and the Imperial Censorate. They had their own jails, investigation, arrest, and interrogation rights. They directly took orders from the emperor and could arrest anyone, including relatives of the emperor, and conduct secret interrogations. No matter if you were a prime minister or a king, as long as you were targeted by the embroidered uniform guard, they would have all sorts of methods to destroy your family. At the start of the Ming dynasty, Zhu Yuanzhang's prime minister, Hu Weiyong, was extremely powerful, which made Zhu Yuanzhang wary of him. And the mission of pulling out this nail fell on the shoulders of the first commander of the embroidered uniform guards, Mao Xiang. Mao Xiang, as the commander of the embroidered uniform guards, was also very iron-blooded. He thoroughly investigated Hu Weiyong's case, which involved tens of thousands of people and had a huge impact. Unfortunately, after Mao Xiang completed Hu Weiyong's case, Zhu Yuanzhang killed him to appease the public. As Mao Xiang's successor, the second commander of the embroidered uniform guard, Jiang Xian, also did an earth-shattering case, which was the case of Blue Jade. Unfortunately, he followed in the footsteps of his predecessor and was executed by Zhu Yuanzhang after the Blue Jade case. The commander of the embroidered uniform guard had the North and South guards under him. The North and South guards had 5 guards under them, and the commanders were called Qianhu, Baihu, Zongqi, and Xiaoqi. Normal soldiers were called lieutenants and strongmen. The embroidered uniform guard usually had around 1,000 soldiers, and at its peak, there were around 60,000 of them. In the history of the Ming dynasty, the embroidered uniform guard was something that the officials of the imperial court feared. They were afraid that if they said something wrong, they would be locked up in the embroidered uniform guard's jails. The embroidered uniform guard could be said to be the emperor's killing weapon, and the birth of this organization itself was crowned with glory. To a certain extent, they represented the emperor in handling cases, and their power was evident. Furthermore, the embroidered uniform guard had a complete judicial system and intelligence system, and it was simply heaven-defying. It was because the embroidered uniform guard had too much power that it became something that some people feared. Naturally, it also became something that some people wanted. When Wang Zhen was still alive, he had stretched his hand into the embroidered uniform guard and asked them to handle many personal matters for him. Because of this, this organization became impure. Everyone wanted to arrange people here, and it was far less powerful than it was at the beginning of the Ming dynasty. At the very least, Yang Qindong wasn't afraid of this department. In fact, he had been an official in the Imperial Secret Service before. However, to many officials and commoners, the embroidered uniform guards were still a lofty existence. In their eyes, they were omnipotent. For example, Su Maner had always thought that the embroidered uniform guards were very powerful. Now, the commander of the brocade guards had found him and said that as long as he killed Yang Qindong at the crucial moment, he would send people to reinvestigate the Su family's case and redress their innocence. She believed him and appeared in Yang Qindong's line of sight. Ha, he's courting death. When he heard the name Menda, Yang Qindong didn't panic at all. He was even afraid. Instead, he was filled with anger and killing intent. Since this person wanted to jump out of the stage, he better not let himself touch him. Otherwise, he would definitely chop off his head and kick it like a ball. Oh right, does Guaning know your mission? He probably doesn't know. I told the public that I came here because I admire my husband's talent and took the initiative to come. He's only temporarily protecting me. Su Maner shook her head and explained her analysis. Hearing this, Yang Qindong nodded in agreement. Since it was a secret, the fewer people who knew, the better. It was normal for Guaning, who was only a fifth-rank official, to not know about this. Since Guaning didn't know, Kuang Yi probably didn't know either. Otherwise, he, who knew how powerful he was, wouldn't send his trusted aide to send him up. Wouldn't that be handing over his weakness to others? Only a fool would do such a thing. After knowing that Kuang Yi had nothing to do with this, Yang Qindong felt a little better. If even this person, who had a friendship with his father and was indebted to him for saving his life, still wanted to kill him, then he would really lose confidence in everyone in the southern Ming dynasty. Oh right, there was also Yingzong. Obviously, he was a little conflicted about this matter. Perhaps he was also afraid of him, which was why he chose to ignore this matter. It would be best if he killed him, but it didn't matter if he couldn't kill him. That was why he didn't appear. Otherwise, if even the emperor appeared and gave a promise, Su Maner wouldn't have waited until now to take action. She would have taken the initiative to attack long ago. After finally knowing who the mastermind was, Yang Qindong felt much more relaxed. He hugged Su Maner's body tightly. Maner, only Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and your maid, Xiao Yun, know about what happened today. Just treat everything as a dream. No one will mention what happened today in the future. You can just stay by my side with peace of mind. When the time is right, I will give you a status and marry you. How about that? As for the Su family's injustice, since you are my woman, then I am also the son-in-law of the Su family. Leave this matter to your husband. I will definitely give you a satisfactory explanation. How about that? Husband. Su Maner started crying again. She was still moved to tears. This kind of thinking of her in all aspects melted Su Maner's heart. She didn't know why, but she actually said, "Husband, you're still thinking about it, right? Why don't you let me serve you?" "Oh. You still have the strength," Yang Qindong said in surprise. Not long after, the sound of spring echoed in the boudoir again. Su Maner had become one of the 6th young master's women. This matter had become a secret for the time being. Only the 2 madams, Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei and the first guard team knew about it. The reason why it hadn't been made public was that Yang Qindong wanted to numb his opponents. Yang Xie still needed a large number of people and military strength to continue developing. Before they met the conditions, they couldn't fall out with the Ming dynasty for the time being. Because of this matter, Hu Yan and Lady Shui had both comforted Su Maner. They said that their husbands seemed to be able to go anywhere in the world, but in reality, there were too many restrictions. Even in the southern Ming dynasty's capital, there were still 2 madams. Their husband had to take care of all of this. Su Maner's matter could only be suppressed for now. This was also because Yang Qindong only told Hu Yan and Lady Shui that Su Maner was sent by the Southern Ming Emperor to spy on him. It was only because of love that she chose to tell him everything. He didn't say anything about Su Maner's actions because he didn't want the madams to have any knot in their hearts. Su Maner's first thought was to redress the Su family's reputation. As for other matters, she didn't care. As long as Yang Qindong treated her well, everything would be fine. Su Maner's matter had been temporarily resolved. If the Su family's matter wanted to be resolved, they needed an opportunity. They couldn't be too hasty. The first thing they had to resolve was the matter in front of them. After Laizhou Prefecture became an empty city, Yang Qindong ordered a large fire to burn down more than half of the place. To the outside world, it was said that it was done by the remnants of the Huang bandit army. This way, many facts could be covered up. For example, the disappearance of a large number of people could be considered an explanation. After the fire in Laizhou, the people who should have left had to leave. On a flat beach near the sea, Yang Qindong personally sent everyone off. Among them were Su Maner and her maid, Xiao Yun. Since the Huang bandit army had been destroyed, logically speaking, Su Maner should have taken action. However, now that Yang Qindong was fine, this woman had to disappear. At the very least, she had to make sure that Menda couldn't find her. Based on the embroidered uniform guard's way of doing things, it didn't seem safe to leave her anywhere. In the end, they decided to send her to Qiqian City. In Yang Qindong's words, it was to let her go there to relax. In addition, she could better display her abilities and capture the Qiqian City military's song and dance troupe. This was an outstanding troupe that served the army. If used well, it would be of great use outside of the war. Just based on this, it was worthy of Yang Qindong's attention. To Su Maner, it was a little cruel to be separated after just being together. However, she also knew that regardless of whether it was her own matter or her husband's matter, they were all important matters. In comparison, her small matter was nothing. Su Maner agreed. She didn't cry or make a fuss. She only gave Yang Qindong a long kiss in front of Hu Yan and Lady Shui. This was also a way to declare her sovereignty, telling them that she had truly become Yang Qindong's woman. Gao Xiong and Zhu Fangyong left by boat. Yang Qindong didn't go with them to Ryukyu Island. Although he had always wanted to see the changes there, he didn't do so in the end. He knew very well that his mission hadn't been completed. Although the Huang bandit army had been eliminated, Yu Yan and Yu Lai were responsible for the Yunnan incident. Because the Great Ming dynasty was now divided into the Northern Ming dynasty and the Southern Ming dynasty, many changes had occurred that were different from history. Yang Qindong wanted to interfere in Yunnan's matter and had to do so. However, there was a big difference between being asked for help and taking the initiative to help. If he was too proactive, it would inevitably make people think that he had other thoughts. This would be extremely disadvantageous for what was to come. What he needed to do now was wait. Wait for Yingzong and the Southern Ming court to be unable to hold on. Naturally, someone would come forward to ask for his help. Right now, he had only sent Huang Yuliang's head to Gaozhou Prefecture. At the same time, he brought more than 8,000 soldiers. After Wuxing's Cold Front Battalion and the Auxiliary Battalion were added, the group had once again expanded, and appeared here to stay. Yang Qindong brought 7,000 soldiers and stopped outside Gaozhou Prefecture. This made the original Shaozhou General Yu Guang, who was guarding this place, tremble with fear. Logically speaking, the Huang bandit army had already been destroyed. This imperial envoy's mission should have been completed. However, he still brought so many soldiers and swaggered outside the city. What was the meaning of this? What intentions did he have? Chapter 406. If it was anyone else who dared to do this, Yu Guang would still dare to bring his troops to question them, even though he didn't have many soldiers. However, when the person he was facing was Yang Qindong, he didn't have any thoughts of questioning him. Perhaps in his eyes, as long as the other party didn't find trouble with him, he would be lucky. As for questioning him, haha, forget it. He still wanted to live for a few more days. He couldn't do anything to Yang Qindong, so Yu Guang reported the matter to Guanning and Ma Wei in Wuzhou. At the same time, he sent over the head of the bandit leader, Huang Yuliang. In Wuzhou, the frontline battle report was sent down. The Huang bandit army was destroyed and the bandit leader, Huang Yuliang, was beheaded. All of this was placed in front of Guanning and Ma Wei, making them extremely excited. However, other than the excitement, there was also bad news in front of them. The Duke of Loyalty, Yang Qindong, was leading an army of 8,000 people to rest and reorganize outside Gaozhou. This was not a normal army, but a strong army that was very good at war. Facing this kind of army, even if they were given 2 or 3 times the number of soldiers, the two generals still didn't have the confidence to win. What the two of them understood even more clearly was that this so-called imperial envoy status was created to deal with the Huang bandit army. Now that the bandit threat was gone, the title of imperial envoy should also be taken back. So, why didn't he leave and instead bring so many soldiers with him? Report it. Guanning and Ma Wei looked at each other and made the same decision. It was clear that they knew themselves. They knew that in front of Yang Qindong, their ranks were not enough. Since this was the case, they could only hand over the conflict. As for what the emperor and the court decided, they only needed to obey in the future. Outside Gaozhou, Yang Qindong was indeed resting and reorganizing the army. Hundreds of thousands of Huang bandit army were destroyed. There were many people who contributed in the war, so now was the time to reward them one by one. Leng Feng contributed, so those who should be promoted were promoted, and those who should be rewarded were rewarded. Using this trip to Kaohsiung, they also brought many military medals. Now, they could all be given out. After the auxiliary soldiers had performed meritorious deeds, their loyalty and culture were no longer a problem, and they were directly promoted to the Cold Vanguard. In a short period of time, the Cold Vanguard's 2nd Regiment, which originally only had 1,000 people, had grown to 1,300 people. Each of the 3 battalions under his command also had 4 companies instead of 3. Don't underestimate these 300 people who had just become the Cold Vanguard. Their individual qualities were already very strong, and most of them were old auxiliary soldiers from Crimson City. Some of them had already met the requirements to enter the Cold Front, but they had not gone through the final test. Now that there was time, Yang Qindong called Kong Jia, the political commissar of the 2nd Regiment, Song Zhe, the political commissar of the Auxiliary Regiment, and some others to act as examiners and give these 300 people a chance to make a great leap. Temporary auxiliary soldiers, those who had made military contributions and had good personal military qualities, would naturally become official auxiliary soldiers. The auxiliary army also rose from the original 2,000 to 3,000. Leng Feng had 1,300 men and 3,000 auxiliary soldiers. The rest were the temporary auxiliary soldiers that had just joined the Yellow Bandits' army. They also had the largest number of people, reaching close to 4,000. More specifically, the 2nd Regiment of the Cold Vanguard had 3 battalions, each with 4 companies. Each company had 100 people, which was a total of 1,200 people. Adding on the 100 people directly under the regiment, there were a total of 1,200 people. The auxiliary army had 9 normal battalions, each with 3 companies and a company of 100 people, which was a total of 2,200 people. Adding on the 300 people directly under the regiment, there were a total of 3,000 people. The temporary auxiliary army had 10 battalions, each with 4 companies and a company of 100 people. There were a total of 40 companies, which was a total of 4,000 people. The initial 3,200 people had grown to over 8,000 people. Their overall strength had more than doubled. This was the growth rate of an army in a state of war. War was the best way for soldiers to advance, and at the same time, it was the best whetstone for an army that had been through hundreds of battles. The rest and reorganization work was still ongoing. After all, with so many new battalions and platoons, there was a need for suitable officers to take up their positions. How were these people's individual strengths? Did they have the ability to command? Were they able to unite their comrades? How was their loyalty? They had to be tested one by one. While the Yang family army was reorganizing, the southern Ming capital's royal palace in Nanjing was also bustling with activity. The chaos in Guangdong had been resolved. The Huang bandit army had been destroyed, and the head of the bandit Huang Yuliang had been beheaded. The head had already been sent to the Ministry of War for verification. Logically speaking, this should have been good news. The southern Ming dynasty had not been established for long, and its internal affairs had not been completely stabilized. However, there were two huge wars in succession, causing the treasury, which was not full to begin with, to become much emptier. For this matter, Empress Qian had already begun to live frugally in the imperial harem. Although the effect was not great, it represented a signal that even the imperial family was living frugally. These officials naturally had to do something, and by following their example, they could save some money. With one less person on both sides, the southern Ming dynasty should be relieved. However, because of the news that Yang Qindong had stayed outside Gaozhou's prefectural city to rest and reorganize, all of the officials, including Zhu Qizhen, could not remain calm. If the Huang bandit army was a poisonous snake that was very clingy and could even injure people, then Yang Qindong was a fierce tiger that had come down the mountain. The danger he posed was far greater than the former. Such a ferocious tiger did not immediately return to the mountain after eliminating the poisonous snake. Instead, it stayed behind. This inevitably made people wonder if this move was an act of inviting trouble to oneself. If this troop did what Huang Yuliang did previously, it was likely that with the current military strength of the southern Ming Empire, it would be difficult to restrain them. If that was the case, wouldn't the country's foundation be shaken? Minister Kuang, although you did it out of kindness and put in a lot of effort for this matter, now that that person has come and is not leaving, how do you explain this? The first person to make things difficult for Minister Kuang Yi was the Minister of Rights, Liu De. His brother-in-law had lost all faith in Hangzhou, and at that time, it was Kuang Yi who had upheld justice. Although his brother-in-law was in the wrong, and Kuang Yi had explained it afterward, on the surface, Liu De had not pursued the matter. However, could what had happened really be forgotten? He did not speak because the conditions were not right. Now that he had the opportunity, why would he be polite? The spearhead of the attack was pointed directly at him. Following Liu De's words, Imperial Censor Shang Lu also stood up to point out Kuang Ye's faults. This subject impeaches Minister of War Kuang Yi for failing to recognize the talents of others. The officials he recommended to the Ministry of War are not qualified for their current positions. Among them are. Shang Lu opened his mouth and read out a bunch of names. Some of them were generals who had lost in the Battle of Yunnan, and some were newly promoted after the reorganization of the various guards. However, some were young generals who lacked experience. Because of the rebellion, the importance of the Ministry of War was fully displayed. As the boat rose, Kuang Ye's power also increased. Many Yamans had to obey his orders unconditionally. With more power came more responsibility. There were more things to manage, and more things to do. Naturally, there were more people to offend. Originally, the existence of the 6 ministries was a place of checks and balances. Even if some departments had more power, it would be limited. However, when the Ministry of War held great power and was above the other 5 ministries, it was natural that it would arouse public anger. As the imperial censor, Shang Lu had already received a lot of criticism from officials. He did not say it before because of the 2 rebellions and did not have the energy to deal with internal governance. However, things were different now. The chaos in Guangdong had been resolved, which meant that there was one less hidden danger. Next, the southern Ming Empire could put in all their effort to deal with the Yunnan disaster. Now that they saw hope, they naturally wanted to pluck the peaches and snatch the credit. In order to get what he needed, Kuang Yi had to be the first person he had to push down. Even if they could not push him down, they had to show him some power. They had to let him know that there were some people that could not be offended, and some benefits could not be obtained alone. Liu De did it out of selfishness, while Shang Lu did it out of righteousness. However, no matter what, the spearhead was pointed at this old minister of war. When these words were spoken in the court, Kuang Yi held back his trembling right hand and slowly closed his eyes. There was a saying that if one did not seek death, one would not die. Similarly, if one did not do anything, there would be no problems. Kuang Yi, who wholeheartedly served the country, was close to 70 years old. He had been in charge of the Ministry of War for decades and was very proficient in this. It was because of this that he found that many people were incompetent, which greatly affected the development of the Nanming army. As such, he punished some of the generals who were paid without pay and reported fake achievements and replaced them with a group of young generals, hoping that they could change the current Nanming military affairs. This was naturally correct, but it would also affect some people who held real power. It was equivalent to touching the cake in their hands. Just ask. Which general who was paid without pay and reported fake achievements did not have anyone behind him? Even if he did not have a backer in the beginning, once he had money, he would go to the capital to find a backer and find a so-called escape route for himself. The so-called running official was not a specialty of any dynasty, but it had existed since ancient times. As such, Kuang Ye's actions were equivalent to touching a lot of benefits. Right now, only Lu De and Shang Lu stood up. This was already giving him a lot of face. This was also because he did not go overboard when he made his move. Otherwise, according to his intentions, 80% of the generals in the various guard stations would have to be replaced. If that was the case, he would really incite public anger. This time, there would not be only two people who stood out to criticize him. Kuang Yi slowly closed his eyes. He felt some sorrow in his heart, but he quickly opened his eyes again. Then, with a plop, he knelt on the ground. Your Majesty, this official is old and has been unable to sleep at night recently. I beg your Majesty to take pity on me and allow this old official to retire and return to his hometown. Chapter 407. Kuang Yi fought back against the accusation. He didn't try to explain himself, nor did he try to claim credit for himself. Instead, he simply said, I quit. I don't want to serve you anymore. Zhu Qizhen, who sat on the golden dragon throne, watched all of this in silence. After the Tumu incident, Zhu Qizhen's mind had matured greatly. At least, he could see the current situation clearly. Everyone thought that Kuang Ye's behavior had been too excessive and that he had too much power. They wanted to work together to attack him. How could the emperor not know that his subordinates were divided into factions? However, most of them just turned a blind eye to it. After all, only when there was fighting could the emperor's importance be seen. Only then could he find a way to balance things out. In fact, not only the officials, but even the emperor, Zhu Qizhen, had received many secret reports from the embroidered uniform guards and the Eastern faction guards. Most of the reports were about who the Minister of War had met, who he had taken down, and who he had recommended. Because war was imminent, there were times when things were urgent. Usually, Kuang Yi would do things first before submitting a memorial to the emperor to explain the whole story. In a state of emergency, there was nothing wrong with doing things like this. However, once the world was at peace, if someone wanted to pursue this matter, it would be easy to catch them. Even as the emperor, Zhu Qizhen also resented Kuang Yi for not reporting his actions. Sometimes, he would wonder if this old minister still had him, the emperor, in his eyes. This kind of official should be taught a lesson. If even the emperor thought this way, it was no wonder that Kuang Yi could only choose to retire under the criticism of everyone. He wanted to teach Kuang Yi and the other officials a lesson. In addition, the Guangdong rebellion had been resolved, and the pressure on the Ministry of War had lessened. Zhu Qizhen weighed the pros and cons in his mind and said, since Minister Kuang's health is not good, you should rest in the capital for a while. I will arrange for an imperial physician to treat you. As for the Ministry of War, I will leave it to the left assistant minister, Wang Ji, to handle. Unexpectedly, Zhu Qizhen agreed. He didn't make any excuses. When the other ministers saw this, some were happy, some were excited, and some were disappointed. But no matter what he thought, now that Kuang Yi had spoken, it was impossible for him to continue holding power in the Ministry of War. The only thing he could do was to kneel down and thank the emperor. Wang Ji, one of Kuang Ye's deputies, had also stepped forward to kneel and express his thanks. But in reality, the two of them had never shared the same thoughts and ideals. Even during the chaos in the south, this left assistant minister had always been a spectator, sometimes even playing some small tricks to make things difficult for this old minister, secretly stirring up trouble. This kind of person who failed to accomplish anything but was good at spoiling things often had a special characteristic, which was that he was especially good at uniting people. He was also very good at grasping the weaknesses of human nature. It was also because of this skill that he was often the roly-poly in the officialdom. He often took care of the interests and feelings of others when doing things, which also made him very popular. That was why he was able to secure the position of left assistant minister under Kuang Yi. Now that he had the chance, he really soared into the sky. With Kuang Yi recuperating and Wang Ji stepping out, the disputes in the court finally came to an end. Kuang Yi, with a lonely expression, left court early, leaving behind the other ministers to discuss the next step. Wang Ji had just taken office, so he naturally had to perform. He knelt on the ground, and in a few words, he found a solution to the matter ahead. Emperor, in my humble opinion, the Yunnan matter can be solved through the art of travel, Wang Ji, who had already stood up, said confidently. What is the art of traversing? Zhu Qizhen asked with great interest as he sat high up in his seat. In my opinion, we can first appease and reward them. Appease a land called Jiaoji. We can send envoys to contact them and recognize their position as the country's sovereign. We can use marriage to stabilize their hearts. When the time comes, as long as the Jiaoji forces retreat, the king of Min Zhuang and the others will naturally be weakened, and we can defeat them in one battle. Reward them equally. We can send people to the manor of Marquis Shiping and make him the king of Mu to pacify the chaos in Yunnan and guard Yunnan for the southern Ming. With such a great favor, we don't have to worry about them not doing their best. As for the leader of the Miao tribe, Yang Wenba, we can make him the king of Miao, a hereditary title, and make them forever loyal to the southern Ming and the emperor. As for the count of loyalty, we can send people to order them to disband their army. Otherwise, we can order the nearby cities to not provide them with food. At the same time, we can invite the count of loyalty to come to the capital to receive his reward. Without a leader, without food, the army's morale will naturally slacken. He didn't say much, but once Wang Ji's words came out, everyone in the court was shocked and their expressions changed. Since the Great Ming was established, it had always followed the policy of not marrying, not paying tribute to the emperor, and guarding the country with the death of the emperor. Other than at the beginning of the Ming dynasty, there had never been a case of a different surname being made a king. However, Wang Ji's words completely overturned everything. Being made a king and marrying for peace were things that they didn't even dare to think about in the past. Now that it was announced by this person, how could the minister's expressions not change? Not only the officials, even Zhu Qizhen, who was seated high above, had a drastic change in expression. This was equivalent to changing the family rules of the ancestors. He naturally understood the importance of this. Wang Ji, who gave you the guts to say such words? Do you know your crime? Zhu Qizhen questioned loudly with a cold expression and a hint of anger in his voice. This official is terrified. Wang Ji could see that Zhu Qizhen was truly angry. He knelt on the ground with a plop, but his expression didn't change much. Instead, he continued, Your Majesty, to achieve great things, one doesn't bother with trifles. Think about it, the king of Yu, Go Jian, endured hardships to defeat the king of Wu, Fu Chai, and become a powerful country in the late spring and autumn period. Since ancient times, people have only looked at the results of things. Not many people pay attention to the process. Your Majesty, the matter of Yunnan is becoming more and more serious. If we don't stop it, I'm afraid it will harm the foundation of our southern Ming. Wang Ji's words were harsh to the ear. It was as if everything he did was for the sake of justice. If the emperor didn't allow it, it would be as if the emperor was muddle-headed and incompetent. Wang Ji didn't fear the emperor's might. He continued to do things his own way. On the contrary, it made the ministers sigh with admiration at his loyalty. The Great Ming and the Song dynasty also had a rule of not killing scholar officials or those who spoke out. This was the meaning of the saying, "Doctors can't be punished." Wang Ji's honest advice had happened in front of everyone's eyes. Even if Zhu Qizhen was furious, he couldn't punish Wang Ji in public. In his anger, he could only loudly say, "We are tired." After speaking, Zhu Qizhen turned and left. Qiao Jixiang, who was waiting at the side, loudly shouted, "Court dismissed," and announced the end of today's court session. The court session was dismissed, but the ministers still gathered in twos and threes as they left the palace. It could be seen that Wang Ji's words today had quite a big impact on these people. Not marrying for peace and not paying tribute were very impressive. However, as an official, they didn't get any practical benefits. This was only the emperor's glory. If they could sacrifice this glory in exchange for world peace, it was probably what many people hoped for. After all, there were very few people who could put the country before their country. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many traitors in history. There were no secrets in the court session. Kuang Yi, who had just returned home, only sat down to drink a pot of tea when he heard Wang Ji's words in the court. When he heard it, he was furious. He ignored his family's objections and wanted to enter the palace to meet the emperor. However, after the steward who went to inquire about the news came back and said a few words, Kuang Yi fell back into his chair with a plop. He stared blankly ahead and didn't say anything else. "Master, we have new news." Wang Ji went to the rear court of the palace. He said that the emperor wants to meet him. Just this piece of news was enough to prove a lot of things. Although Wang Ji's words were very rebellious, not only did the emperor not punish him, he even privately met with him. This could explain a lot of things. In this matter, the emperor was not completely against it. "Your Majesty, you are disregarding the laws of your ancestors." Kuang Yi, who had recovered from his shock, suddenly roared at the sky. Then, he felt his vision turn black and fainted with a plop. In the palace, Zhu Qizhen met Wang Ji alone. When only Zhu Qizhen, Wang Ji, and Qiao Jixiang were in the side hall, Ingzong suddenly roared with a furious expression, "Are you trying to checkmate me? How many benefits did they give you?" When Zhu Qizhen said these words, his eyes were filled with the desire to kill Wang Ji. This person actually dared to talk about the marriage alliance in front of all the civil and military officials in the court. There was no warning at all. This was checkmating him. Think about it, this news should be spread soon. If he didn't allow it, what would Marquis Shiping think? What would Jiaoji think? What would Yang Wenba think? He could only push them into the arms of King Min Zhuang's faction without hesitation. If that was the case, with the current strength of the Southern Ming Empire, they had no chance of winning against these three factions. Even if they won this battle with the power of the entire nation, they would still suffer losses of 800 of their own to kill 1,000 of their enemies. At that time, if Baiming suddenly attacked them, what would they use to resist? In the end, it was all because of Yang Qindong. He changed the outcome of the Tumu Rebellion and divided the originally powerful Great Ming Empire into the north and south. Compared to pacifying the chaos in Yunnan, or even defeating Jiaoji and quelling the rebellion, Zhu Qizhen wanted to kill his way back to the capital in the north and reunite the Great Ming Empire. This was the great achievement he needed. It was because of this that he wouldn't do his best to pacify the chaos in Yunnan. Wang Ji, who saw this point, stood out and proposed such an idea. Chapter 408. Your Majesty, please calm down. I have been wrongly accused. I have been thinking for the Southern Ming Empire and have not received any benefits from anyone. I only wish that one day, Your Majesty can reunite the Great Ming Empire and return to its golden age. I believe that in order to achieve this goal, any price is worth it. Once your majesty reunifies the great Ming Empire, you can send your army down south. At that time, you can kill whoever you want to kill and destroy whoever you want to destroy in order to restore the great Ming Empire's prestige and prestige. At that time, the history books will definitely be written with a heavy stroke. Long live the great Ming Empire. Wang Ji knew that his words today had touched Ding Zhong's bottom line. However, if he wanted to succeed, he had to do so. Kuang Ye's ability was strong, but he still couldn't do anything about the Yunnan matter. Even if the entire southern Ming Empire mobilized troops everywhere, they could only maintain the current situation. If they wanted to win, how difficult would it be? Wang Ji knew what kind of strength he had. If even Kuang Yi could not do it, how could he do it well? Since he could not do it well, he could only think of other ways. Otherwise, not to mention becoming the Minister of War, it would be difficult to even keep his current position. In addition, he had already met with the Jiaoji envoys and said that as long as the great Ming Empire was willing to marry the princess to King Lili of Jiaoji, they would recognize their independent status. Jiaoji would then withdraw their troops and retreat. Now that Jiaoji knew the bottom line, Wang Ji had an idea. In order to succeed in one strike, he also wanted to express his goodwill to Marquis Shiping. If he could gain the other party's favor and help, it would play a very positive role in stabilizing his position in the imperial court. It was precisely because of his previous interactions and thoughts that he dared to say those seemingly rebellious words in the imperial court today. It seemed to go against the teachings of the ancestors, but after thinking about it carefully, it was the best way to solve the problem at hand. It was just sending out a princess, recognizing a country's sovereign power, and conferring a prince with a different surname. This would be able to stop the advance of the troops in Yunnan and take the time to recuperate and prepare for the future attack on Baiming. This plan should have some hope of success. Knowing what Ying Zong wanted, Wang Ji decided to take the risk. Speaking of which, he was also forced to do so. He wanted to obtain a high position, but when it came to commanding a war, he did not have the ability to command tens of thousands of troops, so he had no choice but to use this method. Wang Ji even knew that he was the one who suggested this idea, but he didn't know how the history books would record him. But no matter what, let's first obtain the position of Minister of War. What if the Southern Ming dynasty really unified the entire Great Ming dynasty in the future? At that time, wouldn't he become a capable minister for eternity? As the saying goes, riches and honor are found in the midst of danger. This time, Wang Ji could be said to have placed a heavy bet. However, whether or not things would develop as he expected, everything would depend on whether or not he could convince Zhu Qizhen. Wang Ji's voice still echoed in the hall. At this moment, Zhu Qizhen did not get angry. Instead, he became much quieter. The Yunnan matter was getting more and more intense. Since the beginning, more than 400,000 troops had been sent in, and it was only enough to maintain the current peaceful situation. If they wanted to achieve the final victory, they would have to send out hundreds of thousands of troops. If that was the case, wouldn't they need to mobilize more troops and spend more money? The Southern Ming dynasty's treasury was almost empty. Could they still persevere? Even if they persevered, what would they obtain after this war? If Baiming took advantage of this opportunity to invade, how should they deal with it? Could it be that he had to continue to be the ruler of a fallen country? Should he agree or not? Zhu Qizhen fell into a dilemma. Your Majesty, you have to make a decision quickly. The current Southern Ming dynasty cannot endure. Seeing that Zhu Qizhen seemed to have fallen into a dilemma, Wang Ji, who saw hope, shouted bluntly. He had the appearance of a loyal official. Sigh. Forget it. Since this is the case, I will leave this matter to Minister Wang and Minister Chao to handle together. I can agree to their conditions, but they must also guarantee that they will help us deal with King Minzhuang. I want to quickly pacify the chaos in Yunnan. Zhu Qizhen knew that if this continued, it would not be a good thing for the Southern Ming dynasty. Thinking that there was no better way, he could only agree first. As for what would be recorded in the history books, as long as he recuperated and could truly unify the great Ming dynasty, what he did today would naturally become a wise move of enduring humiliation. Your Majesty is wise. Seeing that Zhu Qizhen really agreed, Wang Ji kowtowed 3 times to the ground. He knew that from this moment on, his position should be stable. As long as the matter of Yunnan was resolved, his position as Minister of War would be set in stone. Zhu Qizhen actually agreed to the request of being bestowed the title of king and a marriage alliance. He threw the ancestral teachings to the side. Once the news came out, many officials were in an uproar. Many people had tears streaming down their faces, and their faces were filled with sorrow. They finally recognized the fact that the once powerful great Ming dynasty no longer existed. The sudden appearance of being bestowed the title of king and the marriage alliance, as well as the matter of Wang Ji going to Yunnan from Jingdou, caused everyone to overlook Yang Qindong, who was still outside Gaozhou Prefecture. Zhu Qizhen only took back his authority as an imperial envoy, and then had Guaning and Ma Wei in Wuzhou Prefecture take care of this matter. Guaning and Ma Wei in Wuzhou Prefecture received the imperial edict. They also learned about some of the things that had happened in Nanjing and Jingdou through some channels. How is that possible? Although Minister Qing is old, his body is still good. Now that the chaos in Guangdong has been resolved, it is time to focus on resolving the Yunnan matter. How can he be allowed to rest? Guaning, who received the news, had a face of disbelief, and his voice was filled with anger. Ma Wei stood to the side and watched all of this happen. However, he did not say anything. In terms of rank, Ma Wei was a level 3 official, far higher than Guaning, who was only a level 5 official. Previously, he respected Guaning because he was the trusted aide of Kuang Yi, the Minister of War. In addition, Guaning controlled the evaluation of low-level officials and could have a say in his career. However, now that Kuang Yi was forced to stay at home, this person's right to speak was obviously gone, and he could not be respected. This could be seen from the fact that the imperial edict did not reward Guaning after the chaos in Guangdong had been resolved. As Kuang Yi lost power, this person was probably going to be ignored. In the officialdom, there were many people who added flowers to brocade, but few people who helped in the snow. Even if it was for his own career, Ma Wei did not dare to get too close to Guaning. Otherwise, if Assistant Minister Wang Ji found out, who knew if he would make things difficult for him? Guaning stood there and talked to himself for a while until Ma Wei was getting impatient. He could not help but walk up and say, "General Guan, the imperial edict says that we have to go outside Gaozhou Prefecture to resolve the problem of Count Zhongdan. I think we should do it sooner rather than later." "Yes, the matter needs to be resolved as soon as possible." "How about this, we will leave tomorrow." Guaning felt Ma Wei's attitude towards him. If it was not for the matter of Yang Qindong that had not been resolved, he would have already distanced himself from him. However, he himself also wanted to resolve this matter quickly and then go to the capital to see his teacher Kuang Yi. On this point, the two had the same request. "Very well, then I will go back and prepare." He was afraid that Guaning would not go with him. If that was the case, he would not have the confidence to face Yang Qindong alone. With Guaning, it would be fine. If the matter was successful, he would naturally have to take credit for it. If the matter was not successful, then he could just push all the blame onto him. This was the result that Wang Ji wanted to see. How could Guaning not see Ma Wei's change of heart and thoughts? To be able to become the person that Kuang Yi valued and nurtured, how could he not have some ability? He was also scheming against Ma Wei. These two people who were not of the same mind worked together to complete a task, causing the matter itself to be filled with complexity and uncertainty. Not to mention, the person they were facing this time was Yang Qindong. This person was extremely outstanding in all aspects. Before the matter even started, it was already destined that they would not be able to gain any benefits. The matter that happened in the capital was quickly transmitted to Yang Qindong through the Security Bureau. In the largest military tent outside of Gaozhou Prefecture, the first thing Yang Qindong did after receiving the news was to arrange for his subordinates to buy food. In the process of eliminating the Huang bandits, almost all the spoils of war were obtained by Leng Feng. The total amount was close to 10 million taels of silver. With this amount of money, it was more than enough to buy some vegetables and meat from the surrounding big families. Furthermore, the Qing clan and a few other merchants from the south who were cooperating with the Heavens Beyond Trading Company would also send food over. With these, it would not be a problem to feed the 8,000 people. Since Zong wanted to get rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness, then he would play with these people. There were no problems with food, shelter, and transportation. Leng Feng took this opportunity to begin intense training. The main subject of this training was jungle warfare. Because of this, the few barren mountains below Gaozhou Prefecture became a restricted area. Yang Qindong and his men spent 4 days to arrange everything and choose the training area and method. At this time, Guaning and Ma Wei had already arrived at Gaozhou Prefecture. The two of them brought about 100 personal guards. When they appeared, they did not immediately visit Yang Qindong. Instead, they first went to Gaozhou Prefecture and found the Shao Prefecture General Yu Guang, who was temporarily in charge of the matters here. When the two of them arrived, they did not immediately visit him. This already showed their attitude. Perhaps they wanted to use this method to tell Yang Qindong that he was no longer an imperial envoy. When he did things, he had to have some sense of propriety. Don't fall out with them, it wouldn't look good for anyone. Chapter 409. These ungrateful wretches. When they use people, their eyes look forward, but when they don't use people, their faces look backward, Tiger's Mane said angrily. Tiger's Mane is right. They don't need to pay attention to such people, Beta Persei also said in a low voice. He was really afraid that if he spoke too loudly, it would startle the young master. Last time, the young master had said that if he were to speak loudly again, he would be sent to the front lines to fight on the battlefield. Beta Persei was naturally not afraid of going to the battlefield, but he was unwilling to leave Yang Qindong's side no matter what. Yang Qindong looked at Beta Persei, who had deliberately lowered his voice, and couldn't help but smile. Well, Beta Persei, you're doing well. But isn't it very tiring to speak like this? Young master, it's not tiring at all. As long as I can be by the young master's side, this is nothing. Beta Persei chuckled, not showing the slightest bit of reluctance. Alright, stop pretending. I know it's hard for you to speak softly, so the young master found a job for you. You can speak loudly, and the louder you are, the better. What do you think? Yang Qindong smiled and gave Beta Persei an order. After hearing the whole plan, Beta Persei chuckled. Young master, don't worry. I promise to do this well and let them know what the real lion's roar is. Very good. Yang Qindong patted Beta Persei's shoulder in satisfaction, then said to Tiger's Mane, call the first and second guard squads here. The young master needs to arrange the work. This time, we want to be the imaginary enemy of the entire cold front and auxiliary soldiers. We want to teach those rookies a lesson by fighting against a few thousand. Yes. When Tiger's Mane heard that there was going to be a battle, even though it looked like a drill, the thought of a few dozen against a few thousand made him excited. He immediately agreed happily and turned around to call for reinforcements. Beta Persei looked aggrieved. Young master, I want to follow you too. Forget it. Don't you have more important things to do? Besides, it's better for you to stay away from military exercises. Have you forgotten that during the last exercise, I asked you to fake a fight and show mercy to your brothers, but you injured one of them with a slap? You were too heavy-handed. Yang Qindong brought up the past. Beta Persei was very strong due to his tall stature. Even if he held back, a slap was far from what an ordinary person could withstand. Young master, I'll use 30% of my strength this time. Beta Persei still wanted to fight for a chance. Okay, you can go if you want. Get things done first. When they stop bothering this young master, you can come to the forest to find us. Yang Qindong had given Yang, a glimmer of hope, but in return, Yang had a bitter expression. Perhaps Yang also knew that what he was about to do was a protracted battle, and it wasn't something that could be easily accomplished. Tiger's mane quickly conveyed Yang Qindong's message. The first and second guard teams, a total of 40 people, plus 20 people from the Wolf Fang Special Forces and 20 people from the Ghost Sniper team gathered in front of Yang Qindong. Jungle warfare was like a hunting war. In addition to some pursuit and interception, the most important thing was to hide. For a jungle veteran, the jungle was like having a logistics base. Sometimes, a jungle veteran could kill some inexperienced soldiers with traps and take away their weapons. There was an endless supply of edible plants and animals in the jungle. Fire might be the best way to deal with jungle warfare, but it was only suitable for temperate jungles. Tropical rainforests were an exception. During the U.S.-Vietnam War, the U.S. military suffered a lot in jungle warfare. In terms of strategy, jungle warfare might only be to kill a large number of enemies and attack the enemy's logistics to restrain the enemy. In terms of tactics, jungle warfare affected the performance of many high-tech weapons. In the jungle, ears were sometimes more important than eyes. In the jungle, your energy would be consumed by everything around you. Among them, the best tactics were to ambush or wait for the right opportunity. Yang Qindong knew that the role of firearms in jungle warfare would be reduced by at least 30%. In other words, the advantage of the cold front would be reduced to 70% of the original. In order to make up for this shortcoming, more training was needed. Sweat more during training and bleed less during wartime. Although a qualified cold vanguard knew how to disguise and hide, there was a big difference between fighting in the forest and fighting in it. In order to better unleash one's strength, targeted training was very necessary. The team gathered. Before they left, Yang Qindong first told his wife, Hu Yan, and third wife, Lady Xue, that he would be away for a few days. If needed, he would come back at any time. Then, he called Yang San and arranged a few things for him. Nanming wanted to lower their heads to the various powers in Yunnan. This was not something he would allow. If that happened, it would be the same as interrupting his plan. So, what he needed to do was destroy Zhu Qizhen's fantasy and force him to beg and use him. After everything was arranged, Yang Qindong left the barracks with his men in the afternoon. Guaning and Ma Wei, who knew nothing about this, were sitting in the yamen of Gaozhou. General Yu Guang was reporting to them some of the information he had gathered. Saying that it was information was a bit of an exaggeration. He was just stating some facts. General Ma, General Guan, ever since the mercenary army came to Gaozhou, they didn't have any intention of entering the city. They only set up camp 10 li away from the south of the city. The area 5 li away from their camp has been designated as a restricted military zone. Our men tried to enter a few times to investigate, but were beaten back. General Yu Guang lowered his head when he said this. He was obviously ashamed of his men's incompetence. Wait. What did you just say? Beaten back. They really dared to do it. When Ma Wei heard this, a trace of fear flashed across his face. He obviously didn't expect this situation. Yes, they were beaten back. It's just that they knew their limits. The men they sent only suffered superficial injuries. They'll be fine after a few days of rest. Yu Guang nodded and admitted. How dare they? Where do they think they are? This is the territory of our southern Ming dynasty. Every blade of grass and every tree here belongs to us. They actually dared to touch our people in our territory. They are truly audacious. General Yu, didn't you think of retaliating? Ma Wei said angrily. He was the commander of the Guangdong Guards. In principle, once a war broke out in Guangdong, he was the leader of the army and had the authority to command any guards under him. The mercenary army beat up the Ming army here. That was equivalent to slapping his face. They didn't give him any face. How could he not be angry? Retaliate? Yu Guang raised his head when he heard this, then shook it violently. Our brothers can't beat those mercenaries. Yu Guanghui said this because he had worked with these people before. Thinking back to when they were on good terms, he had worked with Wu Xing's 1st Battalion of the Cold Front. He had personally witnessed their powerful military strength, especially the firearms in their hands that could fire consecutively and were incomparably accurate. The power of those firearms shocked him even more. For such weapons, he had even discussed with Wu Xing to see if he could get himself one to show off. Originally, he thought that since he had asked for it, Wu Xing would at least give him some face. Never would he have thought that the usually easygoing Wu Xing would shake his head firmly and say that he didn't have the authority to do so. Yu Guang naturally didn't believe such words. How could a general not have the authority to give a weapon to a friend? He thought that this must be a lie and was very unhappy about it for a while. It was because he had enough understanding of those firearms that Yu Guang was very clear that with his strength, he was definitely not a match for the mercenaries. It was better to not fight this battle to avoid humiliating himself. Yu Guang bluntly said that they couldn't beat the mercenaries. When Ma Wei heard these words, his face alternated between red and white, but he really didn't know what to say because he also thought the same in his heart. After holding it in for a long time, he finally spat out a sentence. But we can't let them hurt our people for nothing. They have to give us an explanation. They did. They said that the area within a 5-mile radius of the military camp is a restricted military zone. As long as we're outside this zone, they won't care what we do, Yu Guang told the mercenaries the answer they gave him. However, this answer only made Ma Wei angrier. This was clearly looking down on him, but he couldn't do anything about it. Who asked him to be weaker than them? If they really fought, then the one who would lose face and suffer losses would only be him. Ma Wei was so depressed that he didn't know what to do. His expression was extremely ugly. His gaze involuntarily fell on Guan Ying, who was beside him. In his heart, this person still had some ideas when faced with trouble. However, when facing the mercenaries, how many people could come up with a better idea? Unless the Southern Ming Empire was willing to put in a lot of effort, it was only an army of 8,000 people. If they could gather tens or even hundreds of thousands of people, they could use up all of these 8,000 people. However, right now, they didn't even have enough military strength to deal with the Yunnan matter. Where would they find the strength to deal with Yang Qindong? Noticing that Ma Wei and Yu Guang were both looking at him, Guanning shook his head and said, "Let's wait until tomorrow. When we see that Yang Qindong, we'll tell him about these things and see how he responds. His 2 wives are still by Ming. I don't believe he would dare to risk universal condemnation and start a rebellion." "That's right. Tomorrow, we'll go ask this Count of Loyalty and see how he answers us." Guanning nodded. At this time, he didn't notice that there was already a problem with his attitude. It was fine if he didn't call him Imperial Envoy, but he didn't even call him Duke of Loyalty. Instead, he still called him Count of Loyalty that Ingzong had given him. Could it be that he forgot that he had asked him to help him deal with the Huang bandit army? Chapter 410. This was the weakness of human nature. Oftentimes, people would only remember how good they were to others. Oftentimes, the good that others had done to them would be thrown out of their minds. The night passed quickly, and some things happened that outsiders didn't know about. For example, Yang Qindong led less than 100 of the best and made preparations in the nearby forest. At dawn, Commander Wu Xing of the Cold Front Battalion led 400 men, 1 auxiliary battalion, and 2 temporary auxiliary battalions towards the mountains. Their goal was to find the 6th young master there and surround him to complete the assessment. Guanning, Ma Wei, and General Yu Guang, who were oblivious to all of this, took their 200 personal guards and headed towards the mercenary camp after eating breakfast early in the morning. As if they were already aware of their arrival, no one stopped them on the way. When they arrived at the camp, the tall Beta Persei appeared. "What are you doing here? Are you here to see our young master's ugliness?" Beta Persei stood in front of Guanning and the others, and then spoke in a voice that was close to a roar. This sudden shout caused the three generals who were still riding on their horses to tremble violently. At this moment, not only did they feel their eardrums ringing, even the horses they were riding on were completely shocked at this moment. They kept kicking their hind legs, causing the three generals to almost fall off their horses. With great difficulty, Ma Wei forcefully restrained the horse. With a stern face, he said to Yang Er, "What are you doing? Why are you speaking so loudly?" "How am I speaking loudly? This is how I speak. If you don't want to listen, then please leave. I don't think anyone invited you here." His voice was raised by an octave. After another round of provocation, the warhorse finally couldn't hold back and began to jump. Because of a moment of carelessness, General Yu Guang was thrown off the horse. Guan and Ma Wei saw that the situation wasn't good. They hurriedly jumped off their horses and didn't follow behind. Ma Wei reached out and helped General Yu Guang up from the ground. He angrily pointed at Beta Persei and wanted to say something. However, Guan stopped his actions and said in a respectful tone, "You're the Yang brothers, right? You just said that we're here to see your young master make a fool of himself. What's going on? What happened to Count Zhongdan? My family's young master has been sick for several days. His body is very weak and his face is very pale. Didn't you come to see the young master now because you want to see the young master's ugly state? Let me tell you, that's impossible. My young master is wise and mighty. He won't let you see his bad side. Also, my family's young master is the Duke of Zhongdan, not the Count of Zhongdan as you said. If you still call him that, it's disrespectful to the young master. If that's the case, don't blame me for being rude to you." As soon as Yang Er finished his roar, a row of cold front soldiers began to move towards them. Further away, there were more cold warriors glaring at them. It seemed that as long as Beta Persei casually shouted, these people would immediately attack and teach them how to behave. The shouting was soul-stirring, and the situation was so unforgiving. Guan, Ma Wei, and the others, who were completely suppressed, knew that it was impossible to see Yang Qindong today and denounce him. They were not prepared. They thought that with their status, Yang Qindong would not dare to do anything openly. But now, they couldn't even see the person in question. Even if they had reason, it was useless. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Guan asked, "Brother Beta Persei, when will your family's young master recover?" "Don't ask me about this. I'm not a doctor. Why don't you come back in a few days? Maybe when the young master recovers, he can see you." Beta Persei saw that Guan was being polite, so he also said politely, but his voice was still as loud as before. When Guan and the others heard it, they couldn't help but frown. They couldn't force their way in, and they couldn't see the person, so there was no use in staying here. With no other choice, Guan and Ma Wei looked at each other and decided to leave first. After a few days, when Yang Qindong's body was better, they would come back to visit. Guan, Ma Wei, and the others were about to leave. Ling Feng didn't make things difficult for them, but only watched them leave. Not long after, as soon as the three of them entered the city gates of Gaozhou, a trusted soldier came to report that the embroidered uniform guard had arrived. The embroidered uniform guard had arrived. The one who came was Commander Wei Guang, a fourth-rank official. This fourth-rank official was extremely high. Even in front of Ma Wei, who was a third-rank official, it was still slightly higher. The four of them met in a secret room in the back courtyard of the magistrate's office. It could be seen that the matter they were talking about was extremely confidential, and not to be known to outsiders. As soon as the four of them met, Wei Guang found the main seat and sat down. Guan was a little unhappy about this, but even Ma Wei, who was of a higher rank than him, didn't say anything, so he simply kept his mouth shut. He wanted to hear what this high-ranking official of the embroidered uniform guard had to say. "Have you seen Yang Qindong?" After the four of them sat down, Wei Guang asked first. "No." The one who answered him was General Yu Guang. He probably knew that his position wasn't very high, and was only a general of a magistrate. At this time, it was most appropriate for him to answer Wei Guang's question. His servant said that he was sick. Sick. After hearing this, Wei Guang's eyes couldn't help but light up, as if he had thought of something. He said that he was sick, and said that he was very miserable, as if he couldn't even get out of bed. But from this general's point of view, this seems to be half-hearted. At this time, Ma Wei opened his mouth, his face full of displeasure. Obviously, he felt that today's trip was somewhat embarrassing. Unexpectedly, after he finished speaking, Wei Guang, who was sitting there, actually nodded his head lightly. Perhaps his illness is true. But it shouldn't be illness, and it could be poison. Poison? Suddenly hearing this, Ma Wei, Guaning, and Yu Guang's eyes couldn't help but light up, then darken. Obviously, they thought of a certain possibility. Yes, we received news that someone had assassinated Yang Qindong, and they even used poison. It's just that there hasn't been any concrete reports. Looking at it now, it is very likely to be true. Oh right, General Yu Guang, you've been here for the longest time. May I ask if you've seen Yang Qindong when the mercenaries arrived? Wei Guang nodded as he voiced his guess. Then he asked Yu Guang. No. I have seen some of the other mercenary generals, but this Yang Qindong, I really haven't seen him once. After thinking for a while, Yu Guang suddenly slapped his thigh and said. Ha, that makes sense. It seems that he is very likely poisoned. And the reason why the army stopped here and didn't leave is to let him treat his illness. We can't even rule out another possibility, which is that something has happened to him, but he didn't tell the outside world. Wei Guang smiled and nodded his head. This time, he had come under Menda's secret order to check on Yang Qindong's situation. Su Maner's sudden disappearance made Menda suspect that she had already made her move, and then was silenced by Yang Qindong in a fit of anger. But in the end, everything was just a guess. This time, he sent Wei Guang to get a clear answer. Wei Guang had seen Su Maner before and naturally knew of her beauty. He believed that if it were him, he wouldn't have the slightest bit of defense against such a beautiful woman. Therefore, he judged others by himself and thought that Yang Qindong might have fallen into a trap. That was why when he heard Ma Wei and the others say that they didn't see the main culprit and that the other party said that he was sick, he made such a guess. At this moment, even Yang Qindong probably didn't expect that he didn't come here because the other party's position was too low and not worth meeting. He didn't think that it would become the main basis for guessing that something had happened to him. The basis for guessing that something had happened to Yang Qindong was Su Maner's disappearance. As for whether this woman would stop halfway, Menda didn't even think about it. A woman who lived only for the sake of her family, once she saw a little hope, how could she stop? Ah! If Yang Qindong is really poisoned, this is our chance. After Guaning heard Wei Guang's seemingly determined tone, he suddenly had a feeling that his eyes lit up. Could this headless mercenary army be of use to him? Guaning wasn't the only one who thought of this. Ma Wei's eyes also lit up. If these mercenaries could be used by him, then the safety of Guangdong would have more protection. As the commander of the Guangdong Guards, he would have more confidence in doing things. There is a chance, but we can't make a move on the mercenaries. Wei Guang seemed to have thought of something. After all, the embroidered uniform guards had a wide source of information and knew a lot of information that ordinary people didn't know. We won't make a move on the mercenaries. Didn't they recruit over 4,000 people from the Huang bandit army? We only need them. Guaning naturally knew how terrifying the mercenaries were. He also knew that the mercenaries in front of him weren't all of them. As for how powerful the entire mercenary army was, it was only a guess based on his imagination. The embroidered uniform guards had secretly sent people out to see before, but without exception, there was no news. Since they didn't know how powerful Leng Feng was, it was best not to provoke him and not to make an enemy out of him. However, it didn't matter. Those things had nothing to do with him. He only needed to do the things in front of him well. That was to recruit these people who joined the mercenary army later on for his own use. Ever since he saw the glory of the mercenary army on the battlefield, Guanning wanted to build an army like this. This way, the overall strength of the South Ming army would increase by more than one level. With the addition of these people, his wish might come true sooner. Chapter 411. That's right, we are only after those 4,000 people, Ma Wei said in the same tone. Then he and Guanning looked at each other. It could be seen that at this moment, there was an element of competition between them. Well, that's possible. Then we'll use our own methods. Wei Guang also received a mission, which was to bring some mercenaries back to the capital to resume their duties. From these people, they might be able to get more information about the mercenaries, which would play a crucial role in how to deal with them in the future. As a result, the three parties began to secretly compete with each other. They were all rushing towards the same goal, which was to persuade the original Huang bandits who had just joined the mercenaries to join their side and be used by them. Yang Qindong did not expect this war at all. When he received this news, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Since they want to create more problems, let's play with them. Pass down the order, let's have Yang Er and Yang Wu put on a good show with them. In short, the longer they delay, the better. After Yang Qindong finished speaking, someone had already passed on the order. He himself was standing on the mountainside, looking in the direction of the southwest. At this time, his eyes seemed to be able to see some of the chaotic situation there. Yunnan. It was Jules and his bastard sons who started this mess. Zhu Li, the 18th son of Zhu Yuanzhang, was born with Zhou Fei. In the 24th year of Hanggu, 1391, he was given the title of Min Province. 4 years later, because Yunnan was newly attached, he needed a prince to govern it. In the first year of Jiangwen, the Marquis of Shiping, Mu Cheng, accused the Min king of misconduct, and the Jiangwen emperor demoted him to a commoner. After Zhu Di's death, Zhu Li's title was restored. This Min king Zhu Li was not a good person. Since he was restored to the throne, he acted recklessly, indulged in the old customs, took the seals of various departments, and killed officials. After Zhu Di found out, he took away his vassal king's seal, and then cut off his guards. Later, perhaps because Zhu Di cared for his younger brother, he returned the seal to him. After Ming Renzong ascended the throne, he moved Zhu Yi to Huguang Wugang and lived there. A long time later, a mansion was built for him. At that time, he was almost 50 years old. Zhu Yi was very bad, and so were his sons. Especially the son of a concubine, Prince of Guangdong Zhu Huili and Prince of Yangzhong Zhu Huili. In order to compete for the property of the Prince of Min's mansion, they had already quarreled with their elder brother, Prince of Zhenan Zhu Huili. The reason was that Zhu Huiliang and Zhu Huiliang's mother, Su, didn't have a high status. She was afraid that her two sons would be in a disadvantageous position when dividing the family property. So, she took advantage of the muddle-headedness of the old king of Min and stole from the king of Min's mansion many times. Finally, one day, when she was caught in the act, the ashamed Su Shi hanged herself. Her mother, who stole things, died. How could the two living treasures just let it go? Especially Zhu Huili, who was full of evil tricks. First, he tore down the wall and opened the door, forcibly opened the inner and outer treasury, and took the gold and silver of the family. Then, he reported to the imperial court, saying that his brother Zhu Huili forced his concubine mother to death, and the imperial court should uphold justice. After Ming Yingzong heard about it, he sent the prince consort and the imperial censor to investigate. They found that it was not like what Zhu Huili said. Then, he sent an imperial edict to warn Zhu Yi and his son, "If you violate the rules, I dare not do it." After that, the Prince of Min's mansion was quiet for a while. But then the outbreak of the Tumu castle broke this silence. Because Ming Yingzong's army was defeated and retreated back to Nanjing to establish the southern Ming dynasty, Zhu Qiyu took over the throne and became the emperor of Baiming. The big and powerful Ming dynasty was divided into north and south, and its strength was greatly reduced. Almost at this time, the old king of Min, Zhu Yi, died. Zhenan Zhuhuili became the second king of Min, also called king of Min Zhuang. In history, the brothers were incompatible with each other. After Zhu Huili became the new king of Min Zhuang, the conflicts between them began to escalate. But because of the appearance of Yang Qindong, everything changed. Since Zhu Qizhen and Zhu Qiyu could separate and become the North and South emperors, why couldn't they? Did they have to be entangled with the issue of king of Min? Not to mention that the two brothers originally had titles, namely Guangdong King Zhu Huili and Yangzhong King Zhu Huili. Among the three of them, Zhu Huili was the quickest to react. Just when his elder brother Zhu Huili inherited the throne, he and his younger brother Yangzhong King Zhu Huili came to congratulate him, which made his elder brother and the guards in the family very nervous. But when there were no outsiders, Zhu Huili and his younger brother Zhu Huili told their thoughts to their elder brother Zhu Huili, and the new king of Min was tempted. Since the Ming dynasty could be divided into North and South, why couldn't they divide another one? As long as the three brothers were united, what couldn't they do? After all, the land that could be ruled by the king of Min was still small. If they could fight for it, how big would the world be? Kings, nobles, generals, and ministers were all noble. Not to mention that the blood of the Zhu family originally flowed in their bodies, which was the bloodline of the royal family. Just like that, the three ambitious brothers began to work together and secretly made preparations. They wanted to take advantage of the time when Yingzong's influence in the south was not completely stabilized to make their move. When the ancient people started a rebellion, they needed a reason. For example, Liu Bang, the ancestor of the Han dynasty, killed the White Snake and Emperor Xian. There was a servant in Guangdong King Zhu Huili's house called Duan Yuhong. His father, Duan Hongshan, was a person who knew magic. He was recommended to come here and introduce to Yu Libin, who was good at physiognomy. After planning, Yu Libin appeared as a guest at a large banquet held by King of Min. When he saw the new king of Min Zhuang, Zhu Huili, he said with a shocked look, "The king's physiognomy is really rare in the world. As long as you have the heart to fight for it, you can succeed. The time should be last year. It can't be later than May or June this year. You can directly send troops to the east to Nanjing and you can ascend the throne." When Yu Libin was talking, outside the hall, some guards holding swords walked in and stood on both sides. They looked like they were ready to fight, forcing the guests to make a statement. Two brothers, Guangdong King Zhu Huili and Yangzhong King Zhu Huili, took the lead and bowed, saying that they would support their elder brother. This made the other guests have no choice but to make a statement. One by one, they knelt down and shouted. Since the Ming dynasty's Yongle and Xuande feudal lords removed the feudal lords only had a few guards. How could they have a large army? However, this was not a problem for the three brothers. They asked people to use gold to make a treasure of the king, silver ornament Lingwu Marquis, Qinwu Marquis seal 2, changed to Yuan Xuanwu. They also imitated the emperor's method and made many imperial edicts. Then, they asked their subordinates, Duan Yuhong, Meng Neng, Qin Tianzai, and the others, to use the seal coins and other things. Confer the title of Lingwu Marquis to Yang Wenba, the title of Lingwu Marquis to Tianzhai Miao Jinlong, and the title of Qinwu Marquis to Qinwu Marquis. At the same time, they sent people to contact the old king of Jiaoji, Li Li, and promised them great benefits. In history, Yang Wenba and the others were very clear-headed. When they saw the so-called imperial edicts from the Guangdong brothers, they did not take it seriously, let alone send troops for them. However, in this life, the Ming dynasty was divided into North and South. The power and strength of the imperial court were greatly reduced. In addition, this time, the three brothers worked together. Yang Wenba also had the idea to collude with them. The three brothers of the Min king had the support of several Miao leaders internally and the support of Jiaoji externally. When the general situation was formed, Yunnan was in chaos. When Yunnan was in chaos, the Mu family, as the biggest, warlord, and also the one who had lived here for generations, became the only obstacle to the success of the Min king. It was still the same sentence. When the north and south were clearly separated, the Mu family was not even clear about who they should be loyal to. How could they rashly send troops to quell the chaos? Because of this delay, the Min king's forces grew stronger and stronger. In the end, even the Mu family could not eliminate them in a short period of time. At this time, the news spread to the southern Ming capital, Nanjing. Then, there was the matter of Yingzong sending troops to quell the chaos. Looking at the relevant information that was completely inconsistent with the development pattern in history, Yang Qindong, who was in a well-disguised deep pit, slowly turned off the flashing flashlight in his hand. The situation seemed to be getting more and more chaotic. Even the news from the military camp outside was not as encircling and intercepting as previously thought. On the contrary, it was all kinds of benefits. After knowing that Ming Yingzong, Zhu Qizhen, had adopted the strategy of the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Wang Ji, they would use quiet methods to deal with the mercenaries outside of Gaozhou. For example, they would surround them and not use their weapons. They would wait for them to run out of ammunition and food. This way, they would be able to control them at will until they were forced to withdraw from all of the southern Ming territory. In order to deal with such a situation, Yang Qindong had made preparations in advance. Not only did he send people out to purchase provisions, he also mobilized the Chang family and a few other large merchants in the south. The merchant families were all here to provide support when one side was in trouble. When the time came, with sufficient food, the situation in Yunnan would worsen. When Wang Ji's enlistment strategy completely failed, it would be time for him to return to the stage of history and show his strength. But who would have thought that the other party would actually believe him when he casually found an excuse of being sick? They even began to openly incite the excitement of defecting. According to the report from Beta Persei and Yang Wu, who stayed in the military camp, they had already gone to several dinner parties. They had heard so many compliments that their ears were about to grow calluses. Just enjoy the food and drink. Don't forget your true identity. This was Yang Qindong's reply to the two personal servants. From this sentence, it was not difficult to see that Yang Qindong was happy to see the situation in front of him. If possible, he wanted to continue like this until there was a change in Yunnan. All in all, the changes in the military camp were good things. At least there was no need to fall out. As for whether the other party could really tempt Beta Persei and Yang Wu to defect, Yang Qindong was not worried at all. Chapter 412. Both of them had been to Crimson City and had witnessed Yang Xie's strength. They had been his personal retainers for such a long time. They had a bright future ahead of them. It would be foolish of them to betray him for the sake of a dream fabricated by someone else. If that was the case, it would be better for it to happen as soon as possible. Instead of waiting for someone to grow stronger, it would be better for a disloyal person to reveal his true colors as soon as possible. Of course, Beta Persei and Yang Qindong would definitely be able to pass the test. On this point, Yang Qindong was very confident. Young master, there are people walking past us again. It seems like there are more than one squad. Should we attack? Yang Qindong lowered his head and pondered about the environment he was facing. He wondered if there was anything he had not considered and if there was a move he could take the initiative to make when Tiger's mane's slightly agitated voice sounded in his ear. They were now in a deep pit. The top of the pit was covered with branches and leaves that could be used as camouflage. Unless one was a professional or was very close to the pit, it would be very difficult to discover such a trap. Yang Qindong had done this kind of concealment and camouflage countless times in his previous life. He was already very experienced in it. In fact, there were more than a dozen such traps in the forest. Tiger's mane and the other 6 members of the first guard squad who followed Yang Qindong were in this pit. They were here to deal with the members of the Cold Vanguard team who passed by and eliminate them one by one. Yang Qindong's lips curled into a smile when he heard that someone had come to his pit. Good. We must eat the fat meat that is in our mouth. We must let the members of the cold vanguard know that the slightest bit of carelessness can cost them their lives, especially in the forest where the environment is constantly changing. Just wait and see, young master. After receiving the order to attack, Tiger's man's eyes flashed with excitement. Even though the bottom of the pit was pitch black, one could still see his eager expression. Not long after, a slight muffled groan came from outside the pit. Obviously, a one-sided slaughter was going on. Marquis Sheeping's residence. Reflected in front of him were two giant stone lions that were 4 meters tall. It was said that the most famous craftsmen in the country were invited to build them when the mansion was founded. After everything was over, the stone lion's eyes faintly emitted a deep light that could shake one's soul. Between the two stone lions, there was a tall and solemn door painted red. The door was inlaid with 7 horizontal lines and 7 vertical lines. There were a total of 49 white door nails, indicating the identity of the owner of the mansion. When he pushed open the heavy door and stepped into the courtyard, not only was it spacious, but the decorations were also exquisite and gorgeous. It could be said to be richly ornamented and splendid. It was even more luxurious than some of the great Ming dynasty's Zhou family residences. This was the Mu residence of the Marquis of Shiping. It originated from Zhou Yuanzhang's adopted son, Mu Ying. Because of his bravery in battle, he repeatedly made contributions. In the 16th year of Hanggu, 1383, Marquis of Shiping was enfeoffed in Yunnan and later promoted to Duke of Qian. From then on, the Mu family became the actual owner of Yunnan. Until now, the newly appointed Mu Bin took over the family's glory and mission, becoming the new Marquis of Shiping and Duke of Qian. However, compared to the previous Marquis of Shiping, Mu Bin not only encountered more problems, but they were also very big. For example, the current chaos caused him to be unable to sleep at night, and his food was tasteless. The reason was the 2 imperial edicts, one in the open and one in the dark. Needless to say, it was the imperial edict from the southern Ming dynasty's Zhu Qizhen, asking him to quell the chaos in Yunnan. The hidden edict was referring to the Baiming emperor, Zhu Qiyu. The meaning of the secret edict was for him to recognize the situation and return to the great Ming dynasty's embrace as soon as possible. As for the Yunnan matter, he could watch with folded arms. When the chaos affected the retired emperor's foundation of governance, he could work together with Baiming to pacify the world. Since the great Ming dynasty was divided into 2, Mu Bin was in a difficult position. He didn't know who to listen to. As the Mu family who had protected the Zhou family for generations, they had never had any thoughts of rebellion. This was the case from the earliest Mu Ying. Even now, Mu Bin still had the same idea. However, the matter of 2 emperors in one country was really difficult for him. Moreover, from his point of view, it seemed that every one of them was orthodox, and every one of them was not. Zhu Qizhen was originally the emperor of the great Ming dynasty. Although news of him was lost due to a crushing defeat on the battlefield, his identity as the emperor had always existed. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was orthodox. Zhu Qiyu was appointed in the face of danger. After there was no news of the emperor of the great Ming dynasty, he succeeded as the emperor and played a very positive role in calming the hearts of the officials and the people. Moreover, he ascended the throne in the northern capital. There were ceremonies and laws. It could be said that it was orthodox. However, it was not. When Zhu Qizhen returned after his defeat, he should have gone directly to the capital. However, he did not have the courage to do so. Instead, he went to Nanjing to establish the southern Ming dynasty. This seemed to be somewhat unorthodox and even had the intention of splitting the great Ming dynasty. Zhu Qiyu was even more so. His emperor position was originally a stopgap measure. Logically speaking, when he knew that Zhu Qizhen was fine, he should have taken the initiative to give up the throne. However, he did not. Instead, he continued to sit on this somewhat illegitimate emperor position. It did not seem to be an orthodox thing to do. These 2 emperors were both right and wrong. It was difficult for Mu Bin. It was precisely this difficulty that made the situation in Yunnan worse and worse. Even if he wanted to go all out now, he was afraid that he would not be able to solve the problem. In war, the most taboo thing was that the commander's will was not firm enough. This kind of thing happened to Mu Bin. Even the commander was like this, let alone the soldiers. They did not know who to listen to, so much so that in the later stages, they did not know who to fight for. They did not even know why. It would be strange if they could fight this battle well. Even Mu Bin could not believe it. Because his will was always wavering and his will was not firm enough on the battlefield, the enemy took advantage of the loophole. Now that things had reached this stage, he could only stay in a corner and wait for changes. It was at this time that Ingzong's special envoy arrived. It was Wang Ji, the left assistant minister who acted as the minister of war. According to his suggestion to Ingzong, he was now splitting his troops into 3 ways to solve the problem. The first way was to form a marriage alliance with Jiaoji. The second way was for the Mu clan to be crowned as king. The third way was to bribe the Miao clan army with a large sum of money. The first way was long and the third way was full of danger. In the end, Wang Ji himself chose the safe and dignified second way, which was to come to the Mu clan and act as a lobbyist. In exchange for Mu Bin's position as king, the Mu clan would send troops to quell the chaos in Yunnan. Mu Bin naturally did not dare to neglect Wang Ji's arrival. Although he had a large number of troops in his hands and had a high influence in Yunnan, he had to be careful. The reason why the Mu clan could continue to this day and hold military power without being suspected by others was because they were cautious and careful. Usually, if a random 5th-rank official of the imperial court came to the Mu clan, he would personally receive him, not to mention a 3rd-rank official who was very likely to become a 2nd-rank minister. In the Mu clan's main hall, the handsome Mu Bin saw Wang Ji, who was wearing a 2nd-rank official's robe and had a humble appearance. The two sides first greeted each other politely, then they sat down and looked at each other face to face. Wang Ji was still a little unfamiliar with Mu Bin. As for his father, Mu Cheng, who had just passed away, had some dealings with him. Since they wanted to talk about things, according to the Chinese's habit, they naturally had to start with a friendly relationship. Wang Ji then talked about some of his and Mu Cheng's past. When someone talked about his father in front of him, Mu Bin naturally listened with a respectful expression. From time to time, a smile would appear on his face to show his respect. Wang Ji was very satisfied with Mu Bin's performance. As they talked, the topic was naturally related to the current situation. Back then, when old Duke Mucheng was still alive, Emperor Ingzong had praised him more than once. He said that old Duke Mucheng had a noble character, was loyal to the country, and fought bravely. He had won the emperor's heart. When he heard the news of old Duke's death, he was really sad for a few days. Now that I think about it, everything seems to have happened yesterday. How nostalgic. Many thanks for His Majesty's love for father. If father knew in the underworld, he would be happy and comforted. Mu Bin stood up and cupped his fists toward the south to show his respect. Mu Marquis is too polite. Not only is His Majesty very respectful to old Duke, but he also values Mu Marquis very much. He has told this subject more than once that although Mu Marquis is young, you do have the demeanor of old Duke. Moreover, you are young and strong, so you should be able to create more achievements comparable to your ancestors. It is because of this that His Majesty has decided to abolish the policy of not being able to confer the title of king. Mu Bin, please accept the imperial edict. As he spoke, Wang Ji's expression became extremely solemn. In the end, he even took the initiative to stand up. Unknowingly, a golden imperial edict with a dragon pattern on the back appeared in his hand. This subject, Mu Bin, accepts the imperial edict. In the face of the imperial edict, whether it was from Ingzong or Daizong, Mu Bin had no reason to object. All he could do was kneel and accept the title. By the will of heaven, His Majesty, the imperial edict says, Marquis Mu Bin of Shiping is young and promising, loyal to his country, and has outstanding military achievements. Today, To thank the Mu family for their outstanding contributions to the great Ming dynasty, I hereby confer Marquis Mu Bin of Shiping as the King of Shiping and award him with a gold medal. For generations, except for the first Marquis Muing, the other Marquis of Shiping were all Marquis when they were alive. Only when they died could they be conferred the title of Duke of Qian. This had become a tradition. However, when it came to Mu Bin, he was conferred the title of King of Shiping without doing anything. Although it was only for this term, it was not hereditary. It was not an exaggeration to say that this action brought honor to his ancestors. Chapter 413. Mu Bin's face was filled with excitement when he heard the imperial edict. He knelt on the ground with his hands flat and shouted, "Long live the emperor! King of Shiping, please get up." After reading the imperial edict, Wang Ji put on a more enthusiastic expression and carefully helped Mu Bin, who was kneeling on the ground. "Thank you, Lord Wang," Mu Bin said carefully. "You're too polite, King of Shiping. You'll be the first king of Great Ming Dynasty with a different surname. I'm afraid I'll need your help in many areas in the future," Wang Ji said deliberately. At the same time, he was also trying to be friendly. Mu Bin had the idea that one more friend meant one more path. Besides, he had to have an important official that he was on good terms with in Jingdo. Only then could information flow smoothly and make better and more correct decisions on certain matters. Now that he felt Wang Ji's enthusiasm, he replied politely, "You're too polite, Lord Wang. In fact, Marquis. I've always respected you, Lord Wang." Changing the title from Marquis to King meant that Mu Bin had accepted the title. Wang Ji, who was reading the imperial edict, could not help but heave a sigh of relief. He was worried that Mu Bin would not accept the imperial edict. If that was the case, it would be even more difficult to count on him to help in the Yunnan matter. Fortunately, Mu Bin accepted the edict gladly. Then, everything could be discussed. "Well said, well said. We'll help each other in the future." "Ha!" Wang Ji smiled and took the opportunity to grab Mu Bin's arm. Then, the two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then, they burst out laughing. Their relationship became much closer in an instant with this smile. When they talked later, they had fewer scruples. Taking this opportunity, Wang Ji finally told Mu Bin about his edict, including some analysis of Mu Bin's situation. "King of Shiping, to tell you the truth, I'm the one who proposed to be conferred the title of king. The reason why I did this is because you didn't show much enthusiasm in the matter of Yunnan, which has already disappointed His Majesty." Wang Ji spoke in a sincere and heartfelt manner. He even intentionally sighed. "Ah. Things aren't like that. I do have some misgivings about the Yunnan matter, but overall, I still did my best." When Mu Bin heard that his actions had caused Ying Zong to be dissatisfied, his face was filled with fear as he tried to explain himself. Looking at Mu Bin's reaction, Wang Ji laughed in his heart. As expected, Mu Bin had his concerns. However, on the surface, he still analyzed the situation seriously. "King of Shiping, you don't have to say much. I can guess what you're worried about and who's behind it. Forgive me for saying something disrespectful, but you've made the wrong choice." "Wrong?" Mu Bin asked doubtfully. "Wrong? You are indeed wrong." Wang Ji nodded heavily. Ying Zong has always been on the throne, and the one in the north is just borrowing the power of others to rise to power. However, in terms of methods and strength, although the age difference is not that big, the actual difference is too great. For example, there were many old officials in the north who were still contacting the emperor, expressing that they had no choice but to lower their heads due to the circumstances. Once the emperor could lead the army to the north one day, they would definitely support each other from afar to show their loyalty. The emperor has been preparing for this. If it weren't for the chaos in Yunnan and Guangdong, this matter would have been done by now. "Is there such a thing?" Mu Bin said as if this was the first time he heard about it. "Of course there is. To tell you the truth, those people who are secretly contacting the emperor are all people with great power and military power. If it's possible, I'm afraid that once the emperor starts a rebellion, the one in the north will be captured without putting up a fight. I'm afraid that there won't be many soldiers left. Think about it, the emperor has been the emperor in the north for more than 10 years. How could he not arrange for people to be there? The emperor's methods are not something that we can guess or see through. At this time, Wang Ji praised Zhu Qizhen with an unfathomable look. Hearing all this, Mu Bin couldn't help but nod. If what Wang Ji said was true, Yingzong's chances of winning were indeed higher. If that was the case, he would have to bet on it. Or rather, he should have a decision in his heart. What is a decision? When others have not made up their minds, you have already made up your mind and taken action. That is a decision. Otherwise, when the general trend is set, no matter what you do, it will be the icing on the cake. Now that Mu Bin was crowned as a prince with a different surname, he had already received practical benefits. If he didn't do anything, he was afraid that he would be laughed at by the world. At this moment, he made up his mind and said to Wang Ji, "Lord Wang, please rest assured. Please tell the emperor that this prince's sincerity has always been on this side. In a while, I will go and announce the general's camp and prepare to deal a heavy blow to the rebels in the territory and show the prestige of the great Ming Empire." Good. Seeing that Mu Bin had agreed so readily, Wang Ji was naturally excited. He laughed heartily and kept patting Mu Bin's arm. "Ping Shi Wang, your decisiveness really didn't disappoint people. It can be seen that you must be a person who can do great things. Your future is limitless. In the future, the Mu family will also have good fortune because of you. This prince is only loyal to the emperor. All this is what I should do." Since he made the final decision, Mu Bin's heart that had been wavering left and right was put down. At this moment, he only had one goal in his heart, and that was to be worthy of the emperor's trust. He would take the opportunity to stabilize the position of Ping Shi Wang and bring good fortune to the Mu family. Not long after, the army belonging to the Mu family moved. 100,000 troops were ready for battle, causing the entire Yunnan to be shaken. Everywhere was filled with murderous intent. Wang Ji's road was successful, but the other two roads were not so smooth. Although the envoys sent to the Miao family promised a lot of money, the opinions of the Miao family leaders were not unified. It was difficult to reach a conclusion in a short time. Although the envoys on the way to Jiaoji successfully met the old emperor of Jiaoji, King Li, in history, this person died, but for the sake of the story, he is still alive, still alive. Dear officials, please don't scold him as a prodigal son, thank you for your understanding. The other party seemed to be satisfied with the so-called marriage alliance, but they had different opinions on which princess to marry. According to Zhu Qizhen's arrangement, this time, the other party was given the daughter of a foreign prince, who was temporarily conferred the title of princess. Although such a person also had the blood of the Zhu family, it was not very pure and her status was not very high. King Li was well aware of this point. Since he wanted to marry, he naturally hoped to find a princess with a pure bloodline and noble status to be his wife. Thus, he put forward his own request. That was, the marriage was fine, but he had to marry the third princess of the southern Ming Empire. The third princess of the southern Ming Empire was Zhu Qizhen's younger sister. During her birthday, Yang Qindong had even arranged a program for her. Because of her status, she was very noble. Later on, after Zhu Qizhen's army was defeated, although Daizong Zhu Qiyu tried to persuade her to stay, she still followed Zhu Qizhen to Nanjing. Because of this, the matter of finding Fu Ma was delayed. Now, she was a girl waiting to be married. Since Li knew about this matter, it was natural for him to have such a request. The other party wanted to marry the third princess, so the envoy did not dare to make a decision. He only said that he would return to the capital of the southern Ming Empire and report to Daizong. As if to put pressure on the other party, Li clamored for the envoy to quickly reply. Otherwise, he was not sure if he would send troops again in a fit of anger and occupy the entire Yunnan. At that time, it would be hard to avoid hurting the relationship between the two sides. The envoy was so scared that he ran out of the Jiaoji army's camp in a panic. He took a detour and headed straight for Nanjing. However, what he and everyone else did not expect was that the Security Bureau had already made arrangements to deal with this envoy. Not long after the envoy entered the Jiaoji army's camp, the assassination attempt was carried out. The envoy was completely unprepared and was killed, along with the dozens of people who followed him. Envoys being killed, this kind of thing usually did not happen. As the saying goes, even if two armies were at war, they would not kill the envoys. It was precisely because of this fixed way of thinking that no one would expect such a thing to happen. As a result, the envoy was only discovered after he disappeared for a few days. At that moment, rumors started to spread. It was said that King Lili had asked Dingzong for two women. One was the most noble and pure-blooded third princess, Princess Shangde, and the other was Zhu Qizhen's current wife, Empress Qian. It was also said that the old king preferred married women. This news was naturally spread by the Security Bureau on purpose. Because the envoy was already dead, the truth of the matter could no longer be investigated. Once such rumors were heard, the news immediately spread to the capital of Nanjing. One could imagine how angry Zhu Qizhen would be when he heard the news. Who knew how many tables he would overturn and how many things he would break because of this? The third princess Shangde was already his flesh and blood. They had the same father and mother. How could such a biological sister marry an old man who was almost 60 years old? If he really did that, how could he face his ancestors after 100 years? Not to mention, the other party even said that he wanted his empress. This was a blatant slap to his face. If it were any other man, they would not be able to accept it. Although it was popular in some places to send women to do errands, especially in Japan, this kind of thing could be said to be common. However, Lady Qian was the empress of a country. Similarly, she represented the face of a country. If Zhu Qizhen really did that, he would not need to do anything else. The whole world would look down on him. Then, where would his imperial power be? Where would his dignity be? In his anger, Zhu Qizhen unleashed a thunderous rage in the imperial court. I order Governor Wang Lai of Huguang, Administrative Secretary Yang Xinmin of Yunnan, and Governor Tongji Dongxing to immediately mobilize the army and attack Jiaoji together with King Shiping. I want him to pay the price for his arrogance and ignorance. Pay the price. The emperor was furious. Immediately, a eunuch went down to pass down the decree. However, all the officials in the imperial court knew that if Jiaoji was so easy to destroy, it would have been destroyed long ago. There would not have been Xuanzong Zhu Zhangji's abandonment back then. Chapter 4:14. Thinking back to when Great Ming was just established, Zhu Di was really prosperous and sent troops to conquer Jiaoji, modern-day Vietnam. At that time, the one leading the troops was the late Duke Qing, Zhang Fu. With the strength of the Ming army, they defeated them and established Jiaoji province. However, as both sides were too far apart, many things were beyond their reach. In 1431 AD, Jiaoji province was abolished and Li Li accepted the Ming dynasty title, becoming the king of Annan. This was a huge blow to the prestige of the central government toward the southwest chieftains. What happened after proved that the negative effects of Xiande abandoning Jiaoji were long-term and fatal. This matter dealt a heavy blow to the Ming dynasty's international prestige in the western region and shook their suzerain status. Losing Annan meant losing the western region. This was something that even Zhu Zhangji did not expect. Since then, Annan had been harassing the border and invading the land. Finally, there was today's humiliation. Zhu Qizhen was still angry as he left court. Beside him was eunuch Chao Jixiang, who looked like he wanted to say something. Chao Jixiang, what's the matter? Noticing the change in Chao Jixiang, Zhu Qizhen stopped and asked with a frown. Even if I die 1,000 times, I will not say anything. However, I am afraid that I will make the emperor angry. When Chao Jixiang heard Zhu Qizhen's question, he knelt on the ground, his face filled with fear. As long as it is for the good of the country and for me, Chao Jixiang can just say it directly. I can forgive you. Zhu Qizhen had a good impression of this eunuch who seemed to be loyal and devoted to him. At least this eunuch was wholeheartedly loyal to him and did things wholeheartedly for him. He was much better than some officials who only knew how to fight for power and profit. He was also more reassuring. Hearing that he was not guilty, Chao Jixiang kowtowed to the ground and said, Your Majesty, this subject believes that the Yunnan matter is not unsolvable. The reason why the progress of the various armies is slow and they have not achieved victory is because the generals at the front are afraid of the enemy. As they say, the emperor is far away and there is no one to supervise them. Is an imperial decree not enough for them to go all out? This subject requests to send an army supervisor to the front lines to put pressure on them. This way, it would be equivalent to His Majesty having an extra pair of eyes watching them. With His Majesty keeping an eye on them, there would be no need to worry about them not doing their best and not risking their lives. Finally understanding the meaning of Chao Jixiang's words, Zhu Qizhen's brows furrowed deeply. Minister Chao means to send eunuchs to the front lines to supervise the troops. This official is not afraid. The people sent can be arranged to be Your Majesty's trusted subordinates. This official will not say anything more about this matter. Chao Jixiang did not admit nor deny. He was afraid that his suggestion would give Zong the impression that he wanted to seize power and meddle in the military, so he didn't dare to say anything. Originally, the Ming dynasty had a system of inspecting the army. Every time there was a war, eunuchs would be sent over. On the surface, it was to supervise the army, but in reality, it was to watch over the generals for the emperor and report their performance in the form of secret memorials. Reality proved that with eunuchs supervising the army, the generals at the front lines did not dare to be negligent. Some even purposely showed a very brave appearance in order to gain the favor of the eunuchs. It was so that their names could be passed to the emperor's ears, and then their future would be limitless. However, ever since the defeat of Tumu, for the sake of Zong's reputation, everyone put the blame on Wang Zhen. There were even people who said that war was not a game. How could there be an outsider guiding an expert? It was also from then on that the idea of eunuchs supervising the army was rejected. This also caused the entire group of eunuchs to revolve around the emperor. Otherwise, without military power, they could be removed and replaced at any time. For the sake of supervising the army, for the sake of seizing military power, these eunuch leaders had thought of ways to solve this problem more than once. However, with Wang Zhen's example as an example, it was extremely difficult for them to change their minds. And now, the opportunity seemed to have come. Zhu Qizhen's dissatisfaction with the situation in Yunnan allowed Chao Jixiang, who was following beside him, to see an opportunity. Chao Jixiang was completely dedicated to the country and the people, and this moved Zhu Qizhen. He had also felt that the imperial power did not seem to have enough control over the war in Yunnan. It was not that he had not thought of sending eunuchs to supervise the army. Although there was a drawback of an outsider guiding an expert, it was undeniable that with eunuchs at the front lines, the imperial power would be able to reach the army, and it would be better for the army to fight bravely. In the past, it was because of Wang Zhen's influence and the obstruction of the officials that he had no choice but to stop the example of eunuchs supervising the army. However, now that Jiaozhi was so rampant, no one would say anything if he proposed to send eunuchs to supervise the army. What? The other party wanted the empress to be his wife. Could it be that the emperor was not allowed to retaliate? Good. Great companion's loyalty to the country is exemplary. Since that is the case, I order Qian Liang to be the eunuch supervising the army in Yunnan. He will supervise the generals on the battlefield and kill the enemy bravely. Those who disobey will be punished according to the law. Zhu Qizhen finally opened his mouth and personally mentioned Qian Liang's name. Chao Jixiang was not surprised by this and kowtowed to the ground again. Your Majesty is wise. Long live the emperor. Who was Qian Liang? He was the nephew of the great eunuch, Qian Sengbao. Qian Xingbao recalled that when he was outside the Yang family in Baiming, he was someone who had wrestled with Jining. He was also an old official of Yingzhong. Later, he followed the other officials to Nanjing. However, due to Wang Zhen's influence, he had been very low-key recently. Lying low was equivalent to waiting for an opportunity. Now that the opportunity had finally arrived, he could finally soar into the sky. It seemed that Qian Liang was Qian Sengbao's man and seemed to have some disagreements with Chao Jixiang. However, that was just for outsiders to see. In fact, since coming to Nanjing, these eunuchs had been unusually united. Perhaps they also knew that if they did not do this, they would not have a chance to stand out. Therefore, on the surface, they did not see eye to eye with each other, but their relationship was very good in secret. This time, Chao Jixiang made a suggestion. He had never thought of sending his own people to supervise the army. He only needed eunuchs to go and it was equivalent to achieving his goal. As for who the eunuchs were, it could be considered a close relationship with him. Zhu Qizhen's imperial edict was sent out. Qian Liang also led a group of genie guards out of the capital and went straight to Nanjing. This scene was seen by many of the officials, but this time, no one spoke out in opposition. If there was someone to blame, blame the king of Jiaoji for speaking too arrogantly. If there was someone to blame the eunuchs for choosing such a good opportunity to stand out. It was so good that the officials could not resist. In the Qing residence in the capital, Kuang Yi, who had been ordered to recuperate at home, could not leave the residence or go to the court to meet the emperor. However, his position as the Minister of War did not change. There would be people who would immediately inform him of the big and small matters that happened in the court. When he learned that the emperor had sent eunuchs to supervise the army in Yunnan, Kuang Yi sighed. Has the emperor already forgotten about Wang Zhen's future troubles? Does he not know that doing this will only make the situation worse? After the long sigh, Kuang Yi could not help but think of Yang Qindong's appearance. After being the Minister of War for so many years, Kuang Yi was someone who understood the military. The situation in Yunnan was complicated and chaotic. How could sending eunuchs to supervise the army solve the problem? If these eunuchs went, not only would they not be of help, but they would also make the situation more chaotic. Then who would solve the problem there in the end? It seemed that it should be placed on Yang Qindong. As for how to deal with Yang Qindong, it was only after Kuang Yi returned to his residence that the imperial court made the decision. It was like the birds were gone, and the bough was hidden. However, the problem was that there were still birds, and there were many of them. He did not understand why Emperor Yingzong was so anxious to hide Yang Qindong. However, now that it had become a reality, what he needed to do was to change the result, and not to find out the reason. Come, get the brush, paper, and inkstone. I want to write a letter to Guaning. Cheili, the temporary location of the Min Prince's residence. Cheili was the Cheili Xian Si, located in the southeast suburb of Jinghong City, Yunnan. This was the place chosen by the Min Prince before he announced his independence. Because of the complicated terrain and the fact that it was far from the central plains, it was chosen as the new place to rise. This was the place where the Min Zhuang was originally the king of foreign affairs. At this time, it was heavily guarded both inside and outside. Men with swords and spears could be seen everywhere to ensure that without the red flag, even a fly could not fly into the courtyard. However, in such a heavily guarded place, a young master in his 20s, wearing a soft gauze tang headscarf, wearing a purple embroidered robe, holding a white paper folding fan in his hand, with a slender body and a jade-like face. He walked gracefully, smiling before speaking, with an elegant and noble temperament, as if he was taking a stroll in a courtyard. From time to time, he would look around, as if he was looking for the beautiful scenery in the courtyard. All the guards acted as if they did not see this young master's appearance. No matter where his gaze fell, it was as if it was a matter of course. Young Master Yao, why did you come here? We have been looking for you for a long time. Two anxious maids came to the front of the young master, panting as they spoke, as if they were complaining about something. Haha, thank you for your hard work. Is the princess looking for me? There was a faint smile on the young master's face. Just this smile alone gave people the feeling of being bathed in the spring breeze. Yes, the princess has prepared a new song. She is just waiting for young Master Yao to appreciate it together. The two maids kept nodding. After saying this, they pulled the young man's arms and walked straight to another courtyard. This young Master Yao still maintained a smile on his face and allowed the two girls to pull him. However, deep in the corner of his eyes, there was a faint killing intent. He was currently memorizing every scene in the courtyard, including how many guards there were, where they were distributed, and so on. Chapter 4:15. Young Master Yao's surname was Yao and his given name was Jun. As a matter of fact, he was as handsome as his name suggested. His appearance belonged to the sunny and energetic type of man. In modern terms, he was the type of fresh meat. He had big eyes and a fair complexion. Many women's complexions were far inferior to his. When such a man appeared, he would often receive the attention of those women. However, what everyone did not know was that Yao Jun had another identity. He was the ace spy of the Yangxia Security Bureau. This time, he came to King Min's territory to infiltrate the enemy's territory and obtain inside information. However, he did not expect that the moment he appeared in the Chirizi Bureau, King Min's sister, Zhu Yan, fell in love with him at first sight because of his extraordinary charm and temperament. This woman, who was given the title of Forever Victory Group Leader, fell in love with him at first sight. Thus, she invited Yao Jun to her home. Naturally, Yao Jun was eager to see this happen. In this way, he would become a frequent visitor to the prince's mansion, so much so that all the guards here knew him. In addition, Princess Yongsheng had previously instructed everyone to be as polite to young Master Yao as they were to her. Thus, she could walk around the mansion at any time without any restrictions. As Yao Jun followed the two maidservants to Princess Yongsheng's courtyard, he said politely and casually, "It's strange. Why is the courtyard so quiet today? Young Master Yao, you don't know. Several princes have gone to the army camp. It seems that the situation at the front line is a little tense." "Yes, I also heard about it. But no matter what, it doesn't matter. This has nothing to do with us women. Also, young Master Yao, although you are a man, you have a good appearance. As long as you please our princess, you will be able to live a life of luxury." The two maidservants talked one after another. When they saw Yao Jun's gaze on them, they could not help but smile shyly. It was clear that his good looks had not only deeply attracted Princess Yongsheng, but even these maidservants were also greatly attracted to him. Yao Jun was very annoyed when others said that he had a good appearance. However, in order to complete the task, he did not show it on the surface. In fact, he was already thinking about the content of the meeting in the army camp. As King Min Zhuang's most beloved sister, it should not be difficult to know. How could he get the information from it? 5 miles away from Min King's mansion, in the military camp, King Min Zhuang Zhu Huilu, King Guangtong Zhu Huilu, and King Yangzong Zhu Huilu were holding a military meeting with their subordinates. The three sons of Zhu had some ability. At the very least, they still had some talented people under them. It was because of the operation of these people that they were able to reach their current scale and become an existence that gave Huang Zong and Zhu Qizhen headaches. These so-called talents included Duan Yuhong, who was good at strange skills, Meng Neng, who was brave and good at fighting, Chen Tian, who was good at talking, and Yu Libin, who was good at reading people's faces and knew some supernatural skills. It was the existence of these talents that made the situation in Yunnan more and more chaotic. They also formed a temporary alliance with Jiaozhi and Miao Jun, and forced the Mu family to not dare to act rashly. Originally, if this situation continued, it would not take long for the southern Ming army to fall into a completely passive state. Then, the entire Yunnan might fall. Then, the war would expand outward, and they would achieve the general trend of occupying a corner of the world. Finally, they would seek the Central Plains and seize the world. However, after Mu Bin was crowned as the king of Shiping, the situation of the war changed accordingly. Is Zong crazy? Since when can a person with a different surname be crowned as a king? Will the world still belong to our Zhu family? King Yangzong Zhu, who was the most impatient and the youngest among the three brothers, could not help but complain. With regards to Zong's decision, which one of them could understand? In their opinion, even if the world was taken over by them in the future, it would still be ruled by the Zhu clan. As the saying goes, the meat will rot in the pot. But now that a person with a different surname could be crowned as a king, there were more variables. Okay, now is not the time to talk about this. Let's think about what to do next. Mu Bin, who has been crowned as a king, will not be able to wait and see like before. Soon, he will make a big move. How should we deal with it? That's the big thing that we need to discuss. King Minzhuang Zhu, who was also the leader of the group, said at this moment. Then, his gaze fell on King Guangtong, Zhu Huihua, and said, "Second brother, you should tell us what to do next." Okay. Zhu Huichen nodded at Zhu Huichen, then glanced at the crowd and said slowly, Mu Bin has been conferred the title of King of Shiping. Even if it's just for this title, he must be our enemy. Previously, we fantasized about joining forces with him and even promised to give him a share of the world. We must change our plans. Fortunately, the negotiations with Jiaozhi fell apart. I don't know who helped us a lot, but they actually killed the envoy sent by Zong. When Zhu Huihua said this, everyone sneered. Obviously, everyone had the same opinion about this matter. It should be King Lily of Jiaozhi who sent people, but the other party did not admit it. In addition, they were allies now, so there was no need to ask the other party to admit anything. The Jiaozhi kingdom will not retreat. Instead, they have been forced into a corner. Next, we can discuss how to deal with King Shiping's army together. I think it will be difficult for anyone to gain any advantage in a short time. As for how to deal with the army of the southern Ming dynasty, we still need to discuss a countermeasure. When Zhu Huihua said this, his gaze naturally fell on Duan Yuhong who was standing below. Duan Yuhong was famous for his strange skills in Yunnan. This person had foresight and considered the future. He had the talent of a military advisor. Now that Zhu Huihua was asking for his opinion, he stepped forward. Three princes, the army of the southern Ming dynasty is actually not difficult to deal with. When the three princes heard such confident words, they could not help but feel their eyes light up. They quietly waited for the next words to appear. Three princes, it was still difficult to deal with the army of the imperial court. They always shrank and did not advance. Even if we wanted to take advantage of them, it would be difficult. However, it is different now. The southern Ming emperor has sent a eunuch to supervise the army. This is our opportunity. As long as we can reveal a certain flaw, I think that even if the generals of the imperial court do not want to, the eunuch in charge of the army will force them to take action. As such, as long as the plan is right, it will not be difficult to severely injure them. If we have the support of the Miao family, perhaps the situation of the entire Yunnan can be settled after this battle. Duan Yuhong's face was full of smiles. It had to be said that his move from the military supervisor's body was a brilliant move. Good, ha ha ha. After Zhu Huihua heard this, he laughed loudly. Then this matter will be handed over to Duan Yuhong. Everyone else must give their full cooperation. As for persuading the Miao family to participate in the battle, it will be handed over to Qin Tian. There should be no problem. The eloquent Qin Tian nodded and said, "Three princes, please be at ease. This subject will do his best to facilitate this matter." Good. Next, we must work together. In the future, once we have success, everyone here will have merit in supporting the emperor. You will all be great meritorious officials. You will all be bestowed with titles and wives. After the matter was resolved, Zhu Huihua, who was in a good mood, laughed loudly in the hall. The situation of Yunnan became more and more clear after Zong was bestowed the title of prince. There was a clear change in the attitude of all sides. When all of this reached the ears of Yang Qindong, who was still training in the forest, he could not help but sigh. In that case, everything will be over soon. It won't be long before someone remembers us. At that time, we will see how we sweep the world. Saying such bold words was not only because of Yang Qindong's confidence in the Yang family army, but also because he saw the weakness of his opponent. Mutual distrust and serious internal friction. How could all of this be compared to the Yang faction, which was developing at a high speed and was united as one? War was more about the hearts of the people. Yang Qindong, who had grasped the heart of the people, had the weapon given to him by Datsang. What else could he be afraid of? As Yang Qindong waited, Shiping Wang Mubin made the first move. Different from the previous probing attacks, this time, Mubin personally led 30,000 vanguard troops and headed straight for Kelisai. However, halfway there, they were intercepted by the Jiaoji army and the army gathered by the three brothers of King Min. According to the previously discussed plan, Shiping Wang sent out his troops, followed by the southern Ming army in Yunnan. They were led by Dong Xing, who led 80,000 troops and headed straight for Kelisai. Perhaps it was because the king of Min's army had gone to stop the king of Shiping's army, so they made rapid progress. They had originally planned to take 7 days to reach the Cheli agency, but they had already covered 3/4 of the distance on the third day. Dong Xing, who led the troops, thought that King Min's army was not strong enough and underestimated the enemy. Coupled with the constant urging of the military supervisor, Qian Liang, out of pride, he did not care that the middle and rear troops were still on their way. He did not care about the drawbacks of lengthening the battle line and led 20,000 vanguard troops straight to Kelisai. However, just as they were about to reach Kelisai, 100,000 Miao troops suddenly appeared, together with 50,000 King Min's troops. With so many enemies appearing like landslides and tsunamis, they rushed into the army of the southern Ming Empire. It was as if a river had flooded the land, drowning the 20,000-strong army. Not only that, even the military governor, Dong Xing, was killed in the chaos. Chapter 4:16. 20,000 vanguards were destroyed, and what followed was a crushing defeat. Nearly half of the remaining 60,000 soldiers were killed or captured, and the other half of them had fled. Only Qian Liang, the supervisor of the army, returned to Guangnan Prefecture with 15,000 generals and barely survived the battle. When the news of the defeat of the southern Ming army reached King Mubin of Shiping, he hurriedly brought his army back to Yunnan Prefecture for fear of falling into a trap. The loss of this battle caused the elite troops that the southern Ming Empire had placed in Yunnan to be completely lost. Their strength had also dropped by close to half. At this moment, King Min, Jiaoji, and Miao Jun's counterattack arrived. They first sent a part of the army to monitor King Shiping in Yunnan Prefecture, and then gathered the main force to surround Guangnan Prefecture. Without any preparation, the South Ming army in Guangnan Prefecture retreated in a flurry in order to avoid being besieged. Besides abandoning Guangnan Prefecture, they even left most of the grains and fodder in the city for the sake of Prince Min's troops who had caught up with them. After abandoning Guangnan Prefecture, they planned to march to Guangxi Prefecture to meet up with King Shiping's army. However, they dared not trust anyone. Fearing that King Shiping would stab them in the back, Governor Wang Lai of Huguang proposed that the newly appointed Administrative Secretary of Yunnan and the former Administrative Secretary of Guangdong, Yang Xinmin, and Army Supervisor Qian Liang both agreed. The army left Yunnan and headed toward Guangxi's Xiqing Prefecture. But who would have thought that without enough communication in advance, the Guangxi army was not prepared enough, causing the army to advance too slowly. Not long after the army entered Xiqing Prefecture, they found the king of Min's troops chasing from behind. After a night in Xiqing Province, the army continued to retreat to the east. They passed through Qingyuan Prefecture, Guilin Prefecture, Guangxi Prefecture, Shaozhou Prefecture in Guangdong, and finally arrived at Ganzhou Prefecture in Jiangxi Province. A few months ago, it was here that Yang Qindong met up with the remaining 10,000 soldiers in Guangdong and solved the rebellion of the Yellow Bandits in Guangdong. However, who would have thought that Wang Lai and his army would also retreat to this place in such a short time? After losing most of the cities in Yunnan, Guangxi, and Guangdong, the southern Ming army finally settled down. King of Min's troops did not chase after them. Instead, they began to digest the land and cities they had just obtained. Because this place was jointly attacked by the Min king, Jiaoji, and Miao people, they still needed to discuss the division of the city. This gave the southern Ming army a chance to catch their breath. But at the same time, it had to be said that after most of the three provinces were occupied, the three armies formed by the Min king's faction also revealed their true nature. They burned, killed, and pillaged everywhere. For a time, the people of the three provinces had no way to make a living. Many big families were robbed. Many people were displaced. They did not have clothes to wear and food to fill their stomachs. The news of the army's defeat spread like a gust of wind to the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. When Zhu Qizhen, who was in the main hall of the palace, heard the news, he fainted on the spot. Not long after, important officials and generals came to the palace. To everyone's surprise, the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, who had been ordered to recuperate at home a while ago, was also present. Kuang Yi stood in the imperial court without the slightest hint of illness, but his ashen face told everyone that he was in an extremely bad mood. It was not just Kuang Yi. There was probably no one in the imperial court who was in a good mood. 1/3 of these officials were important officials in the capital of the northern Ming dynasty. They had come to Nanjing because they trusted Zhu Qizhen. They had originally thought that they would first establish the southern Ming dynasty with Yingzong. Then, after working hard, they would counterattack Baiming and unify the great Ming dynasty. At that time, they would all have the merit of supporting the emperor, and it would not be impossible for them to be recorded in the annals of history. Who would have thought that two seemingly insignificant civil conflicts in the south would lead to such a consequence? The southern Ming Empire had lost 3 provinces in a row. If it wasn't contained, it wouldn't be long before the entire southern Ming Empire would cease to exist. At that time, let alone returning to the capital, it would be hard to say whether or not they would be able to keep their lives. The sudden turn of events and the terrible situation left everyone speechless. The civil and military officials arrived one after another. Then, they all imitated Kuang Ye's gloomy expression, looking very unsightly. The officials were silent, which was a rare occurrence. The head eunuch, Chao Jixiang, broke the silence with his horsetail whisk. The moment he appeared, the commotion attracted everyone's attention. Chao Jixiang's expression was also not good. He first swept his gaze across the officials, and when he saw that everyone was present, he sighed in relief and said, "The emperor has decreed that Kuang Yi, Wang Zue, Qin Sun, Shao Xian, and Shang Lu are to wait in the inner hall." This official obeys. Kuang Yi and the other 4 hurriedly bowed and cupped their fists. Then, they followed behind Chao Jixiang and left the throne room. When the 5 of them left, the other officials looked at each other. For a moment, they did not know whether to leave or not. Some of the officials looked at the Minister of Rights, Lu De, and the Minister of Works, Jiang Yuan. Of the 6 ministers, only the 2 of them were left behind. It was inevitable that they would be looked at. In particular, the Minister of Rights, Lu De, left behind many doubtful gazes. Jiang Yuan was the Minister of Works. He could not play a big role in the war. At most, he could supervise the forging of weapons. However, it was said that he had already forged many usable weapons a while ago. They could be used by the army at any time. As a result, the effect he could play was very small. Lu De was different. He was the Minister of Rights. War was not as simple as fighting. There were more negotiations and public opinion. These were all done by the Ministry of Rights. But now, he was indeed left here. Thinking back to the fact that it was because of his advice that Minister Kuang Yi had to return home to recuperate, which led to the defeat of the war, everyone couldn't help but look at him with many more question marks. Lu De naturally felt this. He also knew that the emperor needed to find a scapegoat for the defeat of the front line. Although it might not be him, the appropriate punishment was always needed. The fact that he did not wait for the emperor's arrival was a clear proof. However, even though he knew this, Lu De still stood there without showing the slightest trace of fear. He knew these courtiers too well. Once you were in power, you could say all kinds of sweet words, even mushy ones, out of your mouth. On the other hand, once you've lost your power, you'll be able to say all sorts of nasty things. In the main hall, Lu De, who was standing there, was suffering. Inside the hall, Zhu Qizhen, who had returned to normal, was sitting on the golden dragon throne. Apart from his face being a bit pale, there was nothing wrong with him. Seeing the 5 officials in front of him, Zhu Qizhen pointed at the table and said, "Dear officials, please sit down." "Thank you, Your Majesty. We are guilty, and we do not dare to sit." The 5 ministers looked at each other, shook their heads, and said that they were guilty. Often, the more polite the emperor was to you, the more it meant that it was not a good thing. They had seen this many times. Naturally, they did not dare to casually sit down. "Ai, what are you guilty of?" "The guilty ones are the generals at the front lines. It has nothing to do with you. Sit down." "Minister Quang, you're the oldest here, and your health hasn't been good for a while, so you should take the lead and sit down." "Oh right, is your body all right now?" Zhu Qizhen tried his best to express his concern for Quang Yi and the others. "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. This official's body is fine," Quang Yi said with a face full of gratitude. "Good, good. It's good that you are fine. We cannot lack capable officials like you by our side. That's right, all of you should sit down." After a round of sentimentality, the other officials also looked for their seats and sat down one by one with expressions of gratitude on their faces. After everyone was seated, Zhu Qizhen let out a long sigh and said, "Dear officials, I'm sure you all know about the defeat of the front lines. It was all Wang Ji's rotten idea that caused us to make a mistake in our strategy. Also, the generals at the front lines were afraid of death, resulting in the current situation. We truly regret it." After a series of self-criticism, Zhu Qizhen shook his head with a look of regret. Then, he nodded to Chao Jixiang who was standing to the side. "Yes." Chao Jixiang hurriedly replied. He then took out the golden back of the imperial edict and read it aloud, "By the will of the heavens, Your Majesty, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Wang Ji, retreated in fear of the enemy. He is to be immediately removed from his position and brought back to the capital to be imprisoned. The embroidered uniform guard, Qian Liang, is to be demoted to a baihu of the embroidered uniform guard. He is to be punished with half a year's salary. The governor of Huguang, Yang Xinmin, and the other officials are to be punished with a year's salary. They are to be demoted by half a rank and remain in the army." In the imperial edict, all the generals and officials of Yunnan were punished. This was especially true for Wang Ji. He had only been in Yunnan for less than a month, and he had gone from being in the limelight to being a prisoner. The situation had changed so quickly that it made people sigh at the unpredictability of heaven's might and the difficulty of being an official. After punishing all the officials, especially the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, it was the same as putting an end to the failure of the war. Next, it was time to talk about the current situation. "Dear officials, the traitor Zhu Huiqiang and the others have already caused chaos in Yunnan, Guangxi, and Guangdong. They will soon reach Jiangxi. What advice do you have for us?" Zhu Qizhen's hopeful gaze fell on the 5 old officials. His face was filled with anticipation. What followed next was a period of silence in the inner hall. The southern Ming Empire did not have a large army to begin with. Last time, when Quang Yi was inspecting the guard stations, he discovered that there were some people who were not paid. As a result, the guards were not at full strength. At that time, the rough estimate was that there were less than 1 million people. Chapter 4:17. They had less than 1 million soldiers. Previously, they had used more than 300,000 soldiers in Yunnan. After several defeats, another 100,000 soldiers were added, but they were still defeated. Looking at it this way, even if the entire southern Ming Empire's army was gathered together, they would only have about 500,000 soldiers or even less. These people still needed to guard many cities and prefectures, so it was impossible to mobilize all of them. Otherwise, not only Yunnan, Guangxi, and Guangdong, but other places would also riot due to the absence of the military presence. Without a weapon to use, it was like a clever housewife couldn't cook a meal without rice. No matter who it was, it would be difficult to solve the problem in a short period of time. Of course, it could not be solved now, but it did not mean that it could not be solved in the future. For example, they could recruit soldiers again. After the rule of Ren Xuanji, the population of the Great Ming Empire was still large. It was not difficult to recruit 1 million soldiers under the command of Ren Xuanji. The difficult thing was that they did not have the time. It took time to recruit soldiers, and so did training. If they really recruited 1 million soldiers, it would take at least 2 years to perfect it. It would take such a long time. Would the king of Min's people give it to them? What if they killed their way over during this time? The situation would be even more chaotic. Even if it was too late to recruit soldiers, there was another way that might work. It was to ask for help from Baiming. Today, Baiming did not have any wars because of geographical reasons. And it was said that they had just recruited a lot of soldiers and were training. They should have extra soldiers. If they could borrow 500,000 soldiers from them, the problem of the king of Min could be solved. But the problem was, would they agree? If they really borrowed 500,000 soldiers, would they listen to Yingzong? Don't turn the spearhead and charge to Nanjing. That would really be diverting the calamity. Don't think that Baiming wouldn't do such a thing. Why did the king of Shiping not go all out for a long time? Wasn't it because of them? It was because of their interference that the situation in Yunnan changed. The king of Min's strength was getting stronger and stronger, and now he occupied 3 provinces. It was too late to recruit soldiers, and asking for help was not reliable. No wonder the 5 ministers bowed their heads in silence. They really did not have a better way. Zhu Qizhen was disappointed when he saw the long silence. What's wrong? My beloved subjects, is there really no hope for our southern Ming dynasty? Are we really going to hand over the country our ancestors left to us? If that's the case, how am I supposed to face my ancestors? As he spoke, Zhu Qizhen's eyes actually welled up with tears, an extremely sorrowful appearance. We are incompetent. Wang Zhua and the other 4 important officials saw the emperor's actions and were so frightened that they hurriedly got up and knelt on the ground. People always say that if a minister is incompetent, then a monarch is tyrannical. Even the ruler of a country was forced to shed tears, so how could the subjects not be terrified? Zhu Qizhen was moved, but the ministers couldn't do anything about it. This made him even sadder. His heart seemed to be dripping blood when he saw the important ministers kneeling on the ground one after another. He had called a few important ministers over in order to find a chance to strike back. Could it be that there was really no other way? The Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua, knelt on the ground. The Minister of Personnel, Qin Sun, knelt on the ground. The Minister of Justice, Shao Xian, knelt on the ground. The Minister of War, Kuang Yi, did not kneel on the ground. Zhu Qizhen thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, but when he looked again and saw that Kuang Yi was not kneeling on the ground, his eyes lit up. He suddenly stood up and asked with an anxious expression, Minister Kuang, do you have a good plan? I don't dare to say that there is a good plan, but there is a way. If it works, it can buy us some time. Kuang Yi said with some uncertain evidence. By time? Zhu Qizhen seemed to be confused. Yes, by time. Our southern Ming dynasty has not been in a war for a long time, and our population is flourishing. As long as the emperor issues an imperial edict to recruit a large number of soldiers, it will not be long before we have an additional 1 million soldiers. However, this will take some time. Right now, there's only one person who can buy us some time. Who is it? Zhu Qizhen's expression was incomparably nervous when he heard that there were still people and soldiers that could be used. He asked with hope in his eyes, as if he was afraid that Kuang Yi would not tell him the answer if he asked too late. The Duke of Loyalty, Yang Qindong. Kuang Yi did not make Zhu Qizhen wait for long. He firmly said a name. When the name was said, the other ministers who were looking at Kuang Yi also raised their heads in shock. Then, as if they thought of something, they slowly lowered their heads. Yang Qindong, the person who had once saved Ding Zong on the battlefield, had become a taboo existence at a certain level. No one knew the reason for this. Perhaps it was because he was too capable, or perhaps it was because he was too good at fighting. However, such a person did not completely submit to the emperor. It was no wonder that everyone avoided talking about him. As a result, when Yang Qindong took action to deal with the Huang bandit army in Guangdong, no one in the imperial court was willing to speak up for him. It was as if everyone had a tacit understanding and did not ask about this person. This was like getting rid of a donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. Now that he had encountered another big problem, someone had actually mentioned Yang Qindong. If he were to use him at this time, would he accept it? Would he agree? These were naturally the thoughts of the ministers. This matter was in Zhu Qizhen's heart, but he had more considerations. He knew about Su Muner's matter. Although he did not appear from the beginning to the end, he had already tacitly approved of Commander Menda's actions. This could not be denied. In other words, he also had thoughts of killing Yang Qindong. There was no familial love in the eyes of the imperial family. This was something that everyone knew. However, the actual situation was not only that there was no kinship, but also that it was difficult for gratitude to exist. Since ancient times, how many officials had saved the emperor's life, but in the end, how many of them had a good ending? As the saying went, it was fine to share weal and woe, but it was hard to say if one could share joy. Even if Yang Qindong had saved Ding Zong's life, even if he had contributed greatly to the South Ming Empire, just based on the fact that he was good at fighting but was unable to become a loyal minister, there was no room for discussion about killing him. Under various circumstances, Zhu Qizhen tacitly approved of Commander Menda's actions. Moreover, he had received a secret report from the embroidered uniform guards saying that Su Muner had succeeded. Yang Qindong had been staying in the military camp, using the excuse of recuperating, and so on. When he heard this news, Zhu Qizhen could not help but feel a trace of sympathy in his heart. However, after a while, he forgot about this matter. Perhaps in his eyes, saving his life was not important. What was important was his throne and whether or not he could inherit the country left behind by his ancestors. It was because he had already sentenced Yang Qindong to death in his heart that this person had long disappeared from his mind. Thus, when the situation was critical, he did not think of this person. Now that he heard Kuang Ye's reminder, doubt appeared in his heart. Could it be that Yang Qindong was not dead? If he was not dead, he could make good use of it now. Beloved official Kuang, where is he now? After Zhu Qizhen's thoughts returned to normal, he asked with hope. Replying to your majesty, the Duke of Zhongdan is currently outside Gaozhou Prefecture in Guangdong. I heard that he is sick and is currently recuperating. Over there, my Ministry of War's Guaning, embroidered uniform guards steward Wei Guang, and Guangdong Guards Commander General Ma Wei are all there. Kuang Yi replied in a low voice and gave a simple description of the situation over there. As for why those people were there, the emperor should be very clear about it. Oh. Jin remembers now. Zhu Qizhen suddenly understood and nodded his head. He thought of the secret report from the genie guard a while ago. It said that Wei Guang was thinking of ways to persuade the mercenaries to work for him. At that time, he also thought that this was a good idea. The Great Ming Empire was vast and abundant in resources. What good things did it not have? As long as he was sincere enough, it was not impossible to keep those mercenaries who could fight for him. However, he did not receive any secret reports in such a long time. It seemed that the progress of the matter was not smooth. If it was not smooth, then it was good. If it was not smooth, then there was a possibility of Yang Qindong sending troops to quell the rebellion. Otherwise, if he really accepted the mercenaries, it would be equivalent to falling out with them. Zhu Qizhen quickly made a decision in his heart. After the court, he would notify the embroidered uniform guards and have them stop what they were doing to the mercenaries. At least on the surface, they would ease the relationship between them. However, this was a method of mending the pen after the sheep had been lost. The important thing was to discuss with Yang Qindong. Thinking of this, he said to Kuang Yi, "Zhen heard that the Duke of Loyal Valor is sick. Is his illness serious?" "This I do not know. I have sent Guaning to visit him, but I have not seen him. He could not even enter the barracks. I think his rank is not high enough." Kuang Yi hesitated as he spoke. If that's the case, we should send an important official over." Zhu Qizhen nodded as he said this. Then, his gaze fell on Kuang Yi. "Beloved official Kuang, I am afraid that I will have to trouble you to make a trip. If you can see the Duke of Loyal Valor, ask him to take action no matter what. Don't ask him to defeat the rebels, but at least stabilize the current situation and buy time for our southern Ming dynasty to develop. I am old." This time, Kuang Yi did not immediately agree. Instead, he spoke with an ambiguous attitude. Kuang Yi said this because he was complaining. He was complaining about how Ingzong grounded him at home a while ago. Now that he had a use for him, he did not think about the fact that he was almost 70 years old. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.